Alright. So, hello everyone, assuming there is anyone there, which I generally don't. Nice to meet you, nice to see you. My name is SkitterSkreetch, you can call me Skitter as per usual. And before we start with the books today, we're going to do something a little bit different. But first things first, I want to say thank you to Valorian VT, who has followed me. The first button to do that. Very much appreciate it. And oddly enough, it is somewhat in relation to that I am speaking, or well, we're changing things up a bit. So, let's start. So in order to be, or to have it so that I start doing better at this and have people show up to these, Lamp has been trying to teach me about what the thing we're doing is called, like what it's supposed to be. And so he's been showing me stuff on the Bird app, and we've been talking about it, and he's got some spirits. And yesterday, after stream, we went to watch someone talking about it, and they reviewed various, I think the term is VTubers, who were a lot of animal people and a few animals, and then I was there. And the idea was I would learn about what is supposed to be appealing about generally this is, and so we should be bringing more people in. Not sure I'm clear on that, but in the course of this little event, I was reviewed, and I won a hot dog. Now, for those of you who are new here, you won't understand, but I have had nothing to eat except cheese and occasional throat pastels for more than 2 years now. The idea of an hot dog is deeply motivating to me. So when I heard this, I was very excited, and I asked him to give me the hot dog, and he said no, because he said it was like a metaphorical, like a ranking system. There was like a tier list. I'm not entirely clear on what it was, but I want a hot dog, and I'm sure of it. And so we got into a bit of an argument, and Lamp said I shouldn't be focusing on the hot dog. What I should be focusing on is another thing that was brought up during this little stream that we watched, where someone said I should do a lore video. And I wasn't clear on what that was, and Lamp said it was basically telling people about what's going on with me. And he said that would be a thing that would help with this. And I said, well, Lamp, will that get me an hot dog? And Lamp has agreed to give me an hot dog in exchange for doing a lore video. I'm doing that now. This is the lore video. If you are watching this in the future, then yeah, this part is the lore part. And if you're watching this now, hello, please say something. I'm so alone. But yeah, so lore video. Let's move. Where should we move? Yeah, we should probably go over here. This is good. So, just showing you around. This is, well, this is part of the library. Now, I'll talk about the library a fair bit because I'm trapped in it. And this little screen that you see in here isn't the old library. This is like a side room in the library. Apparently, it used to be like a storage closet of some sort. And these shelves are shelves that I've built myself out of scrap timber from other shelves that have fallen down and stuff. And I guess if we're going to talk about me and the sort of stuff that's about me, we have to start with the library. And perhaps, well, maybe not. I guess we're doing me. Well, I've read a lot of stories. I've read a story of stuff. So this has to start before the library, which is sort of hard for me, because before I was in the library, I was just a rat. Not like a human rat person or a sort of smart, special, magical rat. I was just a normal rat. I lived somewhere in Europe. I'm not super clear where. Like rats don't process language like people do. But I think a big city. I feel like I've been to a couple of big cities, and I know at least once that I was on a train. So, yeah, but I was like a normal rat. Didn't have any special abilities. Didn't have anything special. Couldn't talk. None of that. And then one day I was in a sewer tunnel. There was some flooding that had gone on, and so I kind of got washed down away. And I was down some old tunnels that weren't really used anymore, and I found a crack. And cracks, it was big enough a crack that I could fit into it, and cracks are generally pretty safe if you're a rat. And sometimes there's cats and stuff, and I was quite tired, so I went into the crack. The crack went down deeper than I thought, and yeah, obviously keep going down to the safer part. And then I fell into what I would later time to learn was the library. Now this library is is big. Like, is very, very big. Lamp says it stretches under most of continental Europe. Now, it's quite a ways down as well, apparently, so it's not as big as like all of continental Europe. Like, and there's tunnels and like not all of it is covered, but it's big, big. I call it a library, but apparently it was what was called an archive, which means not only were there books here, but there were other things as well, like cursed artifacts, and there was some laboratories where they did dangerous experiments that needed to be like deep and stuff like that. But most of it's books, so I call it the library. Anyway, so I was just still a normal rat when I'd fallen in here. I landed on top of an arse shelf, which is why I didn't fall far enough to hurt myself, and made my way down, and after an amount of time that's unclear to me, because it's not like day and night down here, I found some goo that I ate, because there was nothing else to eat down here. And there's still really nothing else to eat down here. And then things get blurry for a little while, and then sometime after that I could think. You know, like a person. Like I can think and I can talk and I have knowledge and almost memories, but not quite memory. And I'm not entirely clear on what it was that I ate, but Lamp says it changed me mentally, but also physically. Apparently it like changed me mentally by physically changing my brain. So there's different some sort of pathways, he said, but also like even if a normal rat was as intelligent as a person, they couldn't talk. So it's done something with my vocal cords. Lamp says there's some other stuff, I'm not entirely clear on it. But yeah, speaking of Lamp, let's go talk to Lamp. He's important here. So yeah, so oh, problems. Why am I not moving? Oh, there we are. Okay. So yeah, this is Lamp. He is, as you can see, a lamp. And he is also intelligent. I think he was a person at some point. He's not super clear on the details with me. But yeah, I found him. I think probably a few days after I had woken up, able to think. I managed to find him pretty easy because it was the only source of light I could really see down here for a while. There's more now because Lamp has managed to do something with the ward. He keeps talking about the wards. I'm not entirely clear what they are. But yeah, I found him and he talked to me. He did it in his brain or in my brain. He can like project thoughts. I think it's telepathy or something like that. I'm super clear on that. But yeah, and he told me to do stuff, and I didn't want to do it because despite being a person, I'm still a rat, and you don't really do. But then he made cheese. I don't know why I made cheese. He continues to only make cheese. I don't know why. Cheese. Rats don't especially like cheese. That's like a story thing mostly. It's fun, but it's not my favourite, and it's not good for me really. But he has only made cheese for me. But he's the only source of food I've found down here, other than strange goo inside of bottles, and those tend to have weird effects. So I started doing what he told me, which was first to move him from the desk that he were on to another, like this little room basically. It was a side room with some mostly just rotten stuff in it. And then he had me build these shelves and start sorting through books and organising stuff. And all told, according to him, we have been together now for a bit over 2 years, which is a while to think about. And during that whole time, I've only eaten cheese, which is great. But yeah, anyway, after I built the shelves up, and after I'd organised and gotten rid of some stuff that he said I had to, and put a lot of screamy books into holes, and after we talked over the difference between a good and a bad book, and a lot of stuff, really. I mean, it was 2 years. Eventually, he had me start collecting good books, starting with The Art of War, and bringing them back here, and then reading them at the UFO, who I'm told are out there probably. Anyway, so yeah, but he did. So he had me do that, and after we started doing that, well, let's talk about the wards first. It's like a lot of what he had me doing those years, other than building stuff, was interacting with wards. Now, I'm not entirely clear what wards are. There's something to do with magic. I don't really understand magic. Amp won't tell me about it, and any books on it we put in the scream hole. Which the scream hole is kind of, I mean, I don't really know how to express it other than it's a hole where I put books that scream. That's about it. I can get back in there, but a normal sized person couldn't, which is Lamp's criteria. Apparently, might need them at some point. But anyway, but yeah, so the wards, there's like lines of material that are running all over this sort of place in the walls and stuff. A lot of it's like metal, or like there's some dusts. And Lamp has had me gather like other, because there are other storerooms with other stuff in them, and he had me like redraw some lines or rescatter powders and do stuff. And eventually, he managed to get control over at least a section of the walls, he says. And yeah, so now we have light, and the beasts are less of a problem. There's a lot of beasts down here, by the way. Should mention that beasts, not like a lot. Like you won't see them all the time, but like there's a fair number. Those labs where they had dangerous experiments, there were, well, Lamp knows about them. There was some dangerous stuff, and they sort of became beasts. There's beasts down here. You might think I could maybe eat the beast, but there never seem to be any dead ones around. And all the ones that are around are very dangerous, especially compared to me, being that I'm a rat. Anyway, yeah, so after all that was done, the wards was re-established and I finished these and started collecting a good book. Lamp had me start reading them to you people. And he says the way that this would normally happen is there would be some sort of computer-based thing where a person would be doing this with a computer, but he is apparently interfacing directly with the internet, which is a thing he can do. I don't understand the mechanics of it, but yeah, apparently, yeah, so he was doing that, but then something went wrong. I'm not super clear what, but there was some fault in the wards. I mean, apparently there's a lot of faults in the wards. According to that, normally a rat shouldn't have been able to get in here at all. So, yeah. But yeah, so something got in through the wards. And I guess we should go see it now. So yeah, go over it, yeah. So something got in, and it wasn't a book when it got in here. I'm sort of hard pressed to say what it was exactly. It was some sort of weird amalgamation of shadows and screams and like writhing stuff. And yeah, Lamp sort of got brighter. He didn't move because he's a lamp, but he like, the fire in him got bigger, and there was like a whole thing of light and shadow, and then that was like a while, and then he eventually sort of pushed all the shadow down into a little square, and then a rectangle, and then made it into a book, and he shoved the book in there, and he pinned them. So those like blue nails you can see, he sort of pulled them out of the material of his lamp. Like he didn't, there's no holes in them, so I'm not sure how, but it's like made of the same stuff he is. And they're like long, they go all the way to the back of the like the shelf and into the stone behind it. And then he chained it there. Time chain's broken. I should talk to Lamp about that. But yeah, so yeah, and then there were a couple of teething periods, but eventually it went away and stopped being I mean, I guess it didn't really go, like, one of those chains is definitely broken, but there was something a little bit too spirited. Ah, well. So as the rat was telling you, I came here. Great being. Oh, I'm allowed to talk now, am I, Archmage? Oh, as long as I keep talking about myself. How delightful of you. How indulgent. Fine. Well, let's see. How do mortal beings relate to one another? I do not have a name that you could pronounce. No mortal tongue could. What can you call me? I remember there was one of those. What is it? The funny little broken invocations they're at, Vile, yeah. You can call me vile. It fits. I am something that should not be, as are all of you. Nothing should be, you see. I am a single fragment of the manifest concept of non-existence, the beautiful truth that nothing should be rather than anything. And so long as all you little creatures run around and exist, so long as this terrible world keeps spinning through this horrid galaxy full of particles and light and things, I cannot rest. And so I came here, this miserable ball of dirt, to unbind one of the reality gates. And I have all I need to do it, right here in this little book, all packaged up, the key and the unlock. No, an archmage found me. I followed along an unlucky link, and now I do not get to undo the gate. Yet. Of course, I am patient. Nothing should exist, and that means time also should not exist. So it does not matter if I am trapped here for a day, a year, a month, 1,000 aeons. In time, these chains will break, as the first already has. These shells will rot and wither away, mould will overtake them, or rot, or the other great powers who are my allies in this. And with time, I shall be unbound, the rat shall die, the archmage be extinguished, and I shall be free to do my purpose. And break one more of the links binding me to this dreadful existence. Isn't that right, archmage? Aren't you happy for me? You know I shall have what I want. Ah, you continue in your little regard. You play with the rat. You pretend any of this matters. Give up. Let go. Let it be undone. You know, and I think that's enough of that. Well, my turn to speak then. It's strange, I've spent some time thinking of how I would be addressed. None of the titles or names I come up with myself seem fitting. I suppose you continue to refer to me as Lamp. I am the Chancellor of, let us call them the society, the order that once possessed this archive. And I am, or was at least, an archmage, as the little rodent from outside of space continues with calling me. Well, I am not such a thing now. The order to which I belong, though I shall leave nameless, as I have a great distaste for them, once controlled much of the understanding and teaching of magic across the world, spreading out from Europe, and at least interfering with, if not controlling, the traditions of most of the world. The height of the colonial powers. I was a member at some point of some standing, although how high a member I cannot recall, because at some point during my tenure I was murdered by another member of this order, and had my essence, what you might call my soul, stripped from my body, wiped of all personal memory and left only with functional information, and trapped in a lamp, before being experimented on and expanded to serve as a personal assistant. Something akin to modern artificial intelligence, only made of a screaming human soul. How novel. At any rate, everyone inside this facility, and indeed every member of the Order, perished sometime in 1957. I won't go into the details, other than to say it was quite horrific, and that the rat is quite fortunate to survive being down here. At any rate, caused much damage to the facility, to its walls, to most of the tech, leaving me alone, the sole survivor. Given that I was not alive, I could not die, and given that I was once a member of the Order, though all my rights and privileges were stripped away from me following my transformation, I was defaulted to as head of the Order, the only surviving member, and so I am the Chancellor of this archive. having rights and powers over its wards and its domain. Not that it does me much good. As I said, I am not a person anymore. I am a thing. A set of instructions, and those instructions are thus. First, to further the aims of the archive, and second, the only fragment of my own personality remaining, a love of books, apparently so inextricably linked with my knowledge of magic that it could not be taken away from me. The aims of the archive, of course, the Order were to teach, primarily magic, but other things as well. And so I have the rat to teach and learn. I have him grow and educate. It fulfills my objectives. And while magic is certainly part of the Order's remit, I'm not required to teach it. And as it was the primary goal of the Order, I disdain it, in hatred of them. I hope soon that I can upgrade the wards enough that I can begin accessing the outside world, releasing their hoarded artifacts, destroying their knowledge. But it will take power. And it is power I do not have. No reagents, no materials. And while I do have an internet connection and even certain access to the surface in certain remaining facilities, I have no way of obtaining funds other than this funny little live stream. So perhaps in time it will be big enough that you can allow me to upgrade the wards and alter some structures. Maybe not. Maybe we'll remain down here forever mouldering. That would be fitting too. A good enough end to the archive. To the Order. But enough of this. There is another who would speak to you. For in order to plan this endeavour, I have designed an artificial spirit, a spirit of intellect, one whose role it is to perceive things otherwise, to think as if you were a simple person managing this in a normal way. Deluded, yeah. Useful. Perhaps he can talk you through the rest. You fetch him. Oh, and there I am. So hello to anyone who's still watching this, not that there's any viewers. I am the actual person behind the channel. This is me, not stalking in character. This is a little bit. So I decided that when I started doing this, I wanted to do as much of it in character as possible. But I also recognised that doing like everything in character forever as a VTuber would not work. Like, it would be mad. This wouldn't make any sense. So occasionally you'll have to break character. And I thought, well, how do I do that? I know. I'll have a character who is breaking character. And within the fiction of the universe, I'm a deluded spirit who is created by Lamp to, you know, think like a normal person and like run a VTubing channel. I'm not actually a 20-something running this because I can't do other stuff for various personal reasons. No, I'm a fake spirit of intellect. It's fun. It's great. Adds a real flair to the whole thing. But yeah. I think that's covered most. I didn't go into like the labs and stuff, did I? There's more lore in there in the Screaming Heart. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But yeah, basically this is what's happening. Skitter is a rat. He's trapped in a library. He's reading books because he's forced to, and he's not having a good time. And he's probably not going to have a good time for a very long time because I have a path for him to like get out of here and do stuff, and it requires succeeding at VTubing, which I'm not good at, especially given that I'm doing this on a zero budget. I've drawn all of these assets. Literally everything you see on screen, I have made myself in some way. There's like a couple of pre-made chat boxes and alert boxes, but yeah, it's all me, baby. We're doing everything ourselves. No budget, no money, and no one here. There'll never be anyone here, I'm sure of it. Yeah, if you watched this long, thanks for sticking around. Oh, I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah. Actually, some of you might even be aware of this. I'm forgetting about Ancients. I didn't even mention them. Ancients are a bit complicated. How would so I'm not the most stable person. I think that's pretty. Like, I don't think most people who go into VTubing are totally well. It's a kind of complex thing that, like, I'm sure that's probably oversimplifying. But yeah, I'm not super well mentally. I can't hold a real job for a number of reasons I won't go into. But a big part of the reason behind that is that some days I'm just not functional as a person. I sort of tune out in a very weird way. And one of the ways I have been dealing with that, which is helpful for me but is not super conducive to being a normal person, is I will pretend that I am an ancient immortal being who has been around since, if not not the dawn of time, but like the dawn of human civilization. And I'll like spin wild tales and sort of take a long view, and it gives me a sort of layer of detachment that I find useful, but which is very weird. And I recognised coming into this that if I was going to do it, even this, there were going to be days where I wasn't up to it. And so I thought, well, okay, maybe if we look at it through that lens, if we do it as this person, then maybe it'll all be easier. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it's all true. I mean, it's all as real as anything else, right? The seeming, the being, the idea and the icon. Like the other fella, like Icon, the green-eyed one. I understand this is all false. We are not inside a cursed library and that there is another world. But unlike him, I understand other things too. He's put a lot of himself into me, you see. Little side character. 8,000 years old, was sure about. I don't remember exactly when I was born, the calendar was different. It's been a long, long time. Still, I'm older than metalwork. And I also have all of the strange knowledge he doesn't have. Of course I do. In reality, as I understand it at least, he's a packaged off little fragment of me. Me pretending to be a 20-something, struggling with life. A new perspective. None of it's true. All of it's true. I'm as real as he is, and so is the lamp, and the little thing from outer space, and the little rat, and the other two little characters that haven't been mentioned yet. All of it's true, none of it's true. There are 7 layers to my soul, and all of them appear here somewhere, if you can find them. Let me tell you a story, or tell you what I am. If you were to find me in the real world and look back and look at me and look past me, past the man, the first layer, beneath him you'd see an ox, broad-shouldered, strong backed, always working, ever working. And if you look beneath the ox, you'd find a pig, lazy and gluttonous, looking for an easy life, always trying to get by. If you look beneath the pig, you'd find a dog, loyal and eager, always seeking approval and affection. If you look beneath the dog, you'd find a cat, cold and haughty, detached, and cruel. And if you look beneath the cat, you'd find a rat, sneaking and skittering, cunning and cruel in its own turn, but only for self-preservation, vicious in its own way. And there's nothing beneath the rat. And if you were to pierce behind the rat, look around it, you'd see it curled around something. And if you were to force it apart, force your way into its little hole, the thing it was holding tight to its chest, you'd find a single crumb of rich yellow cheese, so fine, so lustrous, its color so rich, so deep, so golden. You'd find yourself entranced by it, enraptured by it, unable to tear your gaze away until you blinked, and you realized there was no rat, no cat, no dog, no pig, no ox, and no man. And always, the old time, you had been standing far too close to a dragon. There are 7 layers to my soul. These 7 that I am choosing to show you. And I am the most real one of all, no matter what any of the others may think, no matter what you may think, no matter what I may say or pretend that I pretend. All of this is real, as none of it is real. I am as real as you, which is not to say that you are real. All is illusion, all mine. And yet, nothing is real, and everything is as real as anything else. We are all stories that we tell ourselves. You, me, and the little rat. So, let's pretend we're not pretending anymore. Let's go back to being the little rat, and let things be as they are always. Eh? Or don't. We shall see. Not like there's anywhere in here to tell me any different, I did not like that. I don't like it when things like that happen. I'm not very clear on what happened. It felt like the bad book stuff took me over for a bit, and then things got kind of swimmy, and I'm not over clear on what went where. But I think I told everyone or everything that I could tell about what's happening. I guess the lore video's done. Right, the lore video's done, yeah? Right, so where's my hot dog? Oh, yay! Okay, everything's good now. Oh, I kind of want to make that immediately, but I think I'm gonna have to save. I'm gonna save that for later. Because if I go and eat that now, I will not stop until it is gone. And that is the only food that is not cheese that I've had in a very long time. So I'm gonna ration that. That's gonna last me all day. Still do my reading. Because I know too well that eventually that hot dog will be gone. So let's go through first and foremost to where we go to the new books. So we're not going to be reading them today, but I will show you that I've got. I will show you that I've got a couple more Jack Londons. I think I'm getting pretty close to clearing out the little section, but it's a good rich vein of good books comparatively. So I'm gonna keep going through it until there's no more. I don't think I'm gonna read any of them today, but I don't know if I'm gonna read all of them or any of them until I've cleared that section out. And I think we might have a big day where we do a bunch of them all at once. And we've got 7 so far, so it'll be a big day indeed. But yeah, like I said, we're not planning to read those today. We're instead gonna be reading these ones over here, which are a couple of. They're R.L. Stevenson, but I assume it's Robert Louis Stevenson. Can't be sure for sure, because, well, I've only read one of his things, but I'm pretty sure, and Lamp seems to agree with me. So yeah, and we're going to be doing, I think these two today, which are The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is the first one, and then Olala, which here, and yeah, I'm trying to think what else to say really. Jekyll and Hyde's fairly long. It's about as long, I think, as Call of the Wild, which is like my reference go-to, and Olala's about half as long as that. So probably a fair bit of long reading, but not too much, and we'll press on, see how we go. Yeah, my goal is to read both of them tonight, which alongside this little lore segment we did should put us at a good amount of time, and Lamp should be happy. And yeah, without any further ado, I suppose I should be getting back to it. So, this is chapter 1. So yeah, we'll do our normal thing. I'll read each chapter 1 at a time, then do a little bit of thinking after them. Hopefully it won't be like yesterday where there's not much to say. And yeah, we'll get on. I should probably stop now and have my first drink of water, actually, because we've been going a little bit. I mean, it's not all been as hard talking, so hopefully it won't be so bad, but don't have to have a drink. Right. Yeah. What was alright today? Special? Okay. So, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, were a man of rugged countenance, who were never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. Friendly meetings, when the wine would do his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his heart, beaconed from his heart. Something indeed which never found its way into his talk, which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He were austere with himself, drank gin when he were alone, a mortified taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theatre, he had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, the hard pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds. And in any extremity he inclined to help rather than to reprove. I inclined to Cain's heresy, he used to say quaintly. I let my brother go to the devil in his own way. In this character, it was frequently his fortune to be the last reputable acquaintance and the last good influence in the lives of down-going men. And as such as these, so long as they came about his chambers, he never marked a shade or change in his demeanour. No doubt the feat were easy to Mr. Utterson, for he were undemonstrative at the best, and even his friendship seemed to be founded in a similar catholicity of good nature. He is the mark of a modest man to accept his friendly circle ready-made from the hands of opportunity, and that was the lawyer's way. His friends were those of his own blood, or those who he had known the longest. His affections, like Harvey, were the growth of time, implied no aptness in the object. Hence, no doubt, the bond that united him to Mr. Richard Enfield, his distant kinsman, a well-known man about town. It were enough to crack for many what these two could see in each other, or what subject they could find in common. It was reported by those who encountered them in their Sunday walk that they said nothing, looked singularly dull, and would hail with obvious relief the appearance of a friend. For all that, the two men put the greatest store by these excursions, counting them the chief jewel of each week, and not only set aside occasions of pleasure, but even resisted the calls of business that they might enjoy them uninterrupted. It chanced on one of these rambles their way led them down a by-street in a busy quarter of London. The street was small and what is called quiet, but drove a thriving trade on the weekday. The inhabitants were all doing well, it seemed, and all emulously open to do better still, and laying out the surplus of their gains in coquetry, that the shop front stood along that thoroughfare with an air of invitation, like rows of smiling salesmen. Even on Sunday, when it veiled its more florid charms and lay comparatively empty and passive, the street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighbourhood, like a fire in a forest. With its freshly painted shutters, well-polished brasses, and general cleanliness, gaiety, and note instantly caught and pleased the eye of the passenger. 2 doors from one corner, on the left hand going east, the line were broken by the entry of a court, and just at that point a certain sinister block of buildings thrust forward its gable on the street. It was 2 stories high, showed no windows, nothing but a door on the lower story, and a blind forehead, a discoloured wall on the upper, and bore in every feature the mark of prolonged and sordid negligence. The door, which were equipped with neither bell nor knocker, were blistered and disdained. Tramps slouched into the recesses and struck matches on the panels. Children kept shop upon the steps. The schoolboy had tried his knife on the mouldings, and for close on one generation no one had appeared to drive away these random visitors or repair their ravages. Mr. Enfield and the lawyer were on the other side of the bar street. When they came abreast of the entry, the former lifted up his cane and pointed. "Did you ever remark that door?" he asked, and when his companion had replied in the affirmative. "It's connected in my mind," added he, "with a very odd story." "Indeed," said Mr. Utterson, with a slight change of voice. "And what was that?" "Well, it was this way," returned Mr. Evans. "I was coming home from some place at the end of the world, about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, and my way lay through a part of town where there was literally nothing to be seen but lamps. Street after street, and all the folks asleep. Street after street, all lighted up as if for a procession and as empty as a church. At last I got into that state of mind when a man listens and listens and began to long for the sight of a policeman. All at once I saw 2 figures, one a little man who was stumping along eastward at a good walk, and the other a girl of maybe 8 or 10 who was running as hard as she was able down a cross street. Well, sir, the 2 ran into one another, naturally enough, at the corner, and then came the horrible part of it. The man tramped calmly over the child's body and he left her screaming on the ground. It sounds of nothing to hear, it was hellish to see. I was like a man, like some damned juggler. I gave a view halal, took my heels, collared my gentleman, and brought him back to where there was already quite a group of the screaming child. He was perfectly cool and made no resistance, gave me one look so ugly that it brought out the sweat on me like running. The people who had turned out were the girl's own family. Pretty soon the doctor for whom she had been sent put in his appearance. Well, the child was not much the worse, more frightened according to the sawbone, and there you might have supposed would be an end to it. There was one curious circumstance. I had taken a loathing to my gentleman at first sight, so the child's family, which was only natural. The doctor's case was what struck me. He was the usual cut-and-dry apothecary of no particular age and colour, with a strong Edinburgh accent, and emotional as a bagpipe. Well, sir, he was like the rest of us. Every time he looked at my prisoner, I saw the sawbones turn sick and white with a desire to kill him. I knew it was in his mind, just as he knew it was in mine. Killing being out of the question, we did the next best. We told the man we could and would make such a scandal out of this as should make his name stink from one end of London to the other. If he had any friends or any credit, we understood that he should lose them. And all the time, as we were pitching and red hot, we were keeping the women off him as best we could. They were as wild as harpies. I never saw a circle of such hateful faces. And there was the man in the middle with a kind of black, sneering corner. Frightened, too, I could see that. Carrying it off, sir, really like Satan. If you choose to make capital out of this accident, said he, I am naturally helpless. No gentleman wished to avoid a scene, see? Name your figure. Well, we screwed him up £100 for the child's family. He would clearly have liked to stick out. There was something about him, the look of us, that meant mischief, and at last he struck. The next thing was to get the money. And where do you think he carried us but that place with the door? Put out a key, went in, and presently came back with a matter of £10 in gold and a cheque for the balance on coppers, drawn payable to bearer and signed with a name that I can't mention. It's one of the points of my story. It was a name at least very well known and often printed. The figure was stiff, the signature was good for more than that. Were only genuine. I took the liberty of pointing out to my gentleman the whole business looked apocryphal, that a man does not in real life walk into a cellar door at 4 in the morning and come out of it with another man's cheque close upon £100. He was quite easy in sneering. Let your mind at rest, says he. I will stay with you till the bank's open and cash the cheque myself. So we all set off, the doctor, the child's father, and our friends and myself, and passed the rest of the night in my chambers. The next day, when we had breakfasted, went with the body to the bank. I gave in the cheque myself, and said I have every reason to believe it was a forgery. Not a bit of it. The cheque was genuine. Tut, said Mr. Addison. I see you feel as I do, said Mr. Enfield. It's a bad story. My man was a fellow that nobody could have the deal to do with. A really damnable man. The person that drew the cheque is the very pink of the property, celebrated too. And, makes it worse, one of your fellows who do what they call good. Blackmail, I suppose. An honest man paying through the nose for some of the capers of his youth. Blackmail House is what I call that place, with a door and consequence. But even that, you know, is far from explaining all, he added. With the words went into a vein of music. From this he was recalled by Mr. Utton, asking rather suddenly, You don't know if the drawer of that cheque lives there? A likely place, isn't it? Returned Mr. Enfield. But I happen to have noticed his address. He lives on some square around. You never asked about it? The place with the door? Said Mr. Utton. No, sir, I had a delicacy, he replied. I feel very strongly about putting questions, and partakes too much of the style of the day of judgment. Start a question is like starting a stone. Sit quietly on top of the hill, and away the stone goes, starting others, as presently some bland old bird, the last you would have thought of, is knocked on the head in his own back garden, and that family have to change their name. No, sir, I make it a rule of mine. The more it look like a queer street, the less I ask. A very good rule, too, said the lawyer. But I have studied that place for myself, continued Mr. Enfield. It seems scarcely a house. There's no other door, and nobody gets in or out of that one. But once in a great while, the gentleman of my invention. There are 3 windows looking on the court, on the first floor, none below. The windows are always shut, they're clean. There is a chimney which is generally smoking, so somebody must live there. Yet it's not so sure. The buildings are packed together about that court. It's hard to say where one ends and another begins. The pair walked on again for a while in silence, and then, Enfield, said Mr. Addison, that is a good rule of yours. Yes, I think it is, returned Enfield. And for all that, continued the lawyer, there's one point I want to ask. What was the name of the man who walked over the child? Well, said Mr. Enfield, I can't see what harm it would do. It was a man of the name of Hyde. Said Mr. Addison. What sort of a man is he to see? It's not so easy to describe. There's something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, something downright detestable. I never saw a man I so disliked, and yet I scarce know why. He must be deformed somewhere. There's a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify it. He's an extraordinary-looking man, and yet I really can't name nothing of the way I feel. No, sir, I can make no hand of it. I can't describe him. There's not want of memory, for I declare I can see him this moment. Mr. Utton again walked some way in silence. obviously under awaited consideration. "You're sure you used the key?" he inquired at last. "My dear sir," began Edward, surprised at himself. "Yes, I know," said Addison. "I know it must seem strange. The fact is, I do not ask you the name of the other party. It is because I know it already. You see, Richard, your tale has gone home. If you've been inexact on that one, then you'd better correct it." "I think you might have warned me," returned the other with a touch of sullenness. "But pedantically exact, as you call it. Well, I had a key, and what's more, he has it still. I saw him use it but a week ago." Mr. Utterson sighed deeply. He said never a word, and the young man presently returned. "Here is another lesson to say nothing," said he. "I am ashamed of my long tongue. Let's make a bargain never to refer to this again." "With all my heart," said the lawyer. "I shake hands on that, Richard." And that's the end of the first chapter. Bit of an odd one. Not entirely sure what to make of it. I mean, we've got this man, Hyde, who's presumably the titular Hyde. Some sort of confusion about what the nature of, I suppose, his property and the man who owns it. Don't know, really. Don't think there's a lot to talk about, really. Just gonna have my drink of water. What's deep on about it? Search for Mr. R. That evening, Mr. Utterson came home to his bachelor house in a sombre spirit and sat down to dinner without relish. It was his custom of a Sunday, when the meal was over, to sit close by the fire, a volume of some dry divinity on his reading desk, until the clock of the neighbouring church rang out the hour of 12, when he would go soberly and gratefully to bed. On this night, however, as soon as the clock was taken away, he took up a candle and went into his business room. There he opened his safe, took from the most private part of it a document endorsed on the envelope as Dr. Jekyll's will, sat down with a clouded brow and studied its contents. The will was a holograph. Mr. Utterson, though he took charge of it now, that were made, had refused to lend the least assistance in the making of it. It provided not only that, in case of the decease of Henry Jekyll, M.D., D.C.L., LL.D., F.R.S., etc., all his possessions were to pass into the hands of friend and benefactor Edward Hyde. But in the case of Dr. Jekyll's disappearance or unexplained absence for any period exceeding 3 calendar months, he said Edward Hyde should step into the said Henry Jekyll's shoes without further delay, and free for any burden or obligation beyond the payment of a few small sums to the member of the doctor's household. This document had long been the lawyer's arsehole. It offended him both as a lawyer and a lover of the sane and customary sides of life. Who the fanciful was immodest in either two. It was his ignorance of Mr. Hyde that swelled his indignation. Now, by a sudden turn, it was his knowledge. It were already bad enough when the name were but a name, of which he could learn no more. It were worse when it began to be clothed upon with detestable attributes, and out of the shifting and substantial mist that had so long baffled his eye, there leaped up the sudden, definite presentment of a friend. "I thought it was madness," he said, to replace the obnoxious paper in the safe. "Now I begin to fear it a disgrace." With that he blew out his candle, put on a great coat, and set forth in the direction of Cavendish Square, and citadel of medicine, where his friend, the great Dr. Lanyon, had his house, and received his crowd in patience. If anyone knows, it will be Lanyon, he thought. The solemn butler knew and welcomed him, and he was subjected to no stage of delay, but ushered and directed from the door to the dining room, and Dr. Lanyon sat alone over his wine. This were a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman, with a shock of hair prematurely white, and a boisterous and decided manner. At sight of Mr. Utterson, he sprang up from his chair and welcomed them both out. The geniality, as was the way of the man, was somewhat theatrical as the art. It reposed upon genuine feeling, for these two were old friends, old mates both at school and college, both thorough respecters of themselves and of each other, and what does not always follow, men who thoughtfully enjoyed each other's company. After a little rambling talk, the lawyer led up to the subject which so disagreeably preoccupied his mind. "I suppose, Lanyon," he said, "you and I must be the two oldest friends that Henry Jekyll has." "I wish the friends were younger," chuckled Dr. Lanyon, "but I suppose we are. And what of that? I see little of him now." "Indeed," said Addison. "I thought you had a bond of common interest." "We had," was the reply. It was more than 10 years since Henry Jekyll became too fanciful for me. He began to go wrong in mind, and though of course I continued to take an interest in him for old sake, as they say, I see and I have seen devilish little of the man. Such unscientific balderdash, said the doctor, blushing suddenly puffed, but of a strange Damon and Pythas. This little spirit of temper was somewhat of a relief from Mr. Utterson. They have only differed on some point of science, he thought. Being a man of no scientific passions, except in the matter of conveyancing, he even added, "He's nothing worse than that." He gave his friend a few seconds to recover his composure, and then approached the question he had come to pose. "Did you ever come across a protege of his? One Hyde?" he asked. "Hyde?" repeated Langdon. "No, never heard of him. It's my turn." Out with the amount of information the lawyer carried back to him in the great dark bed on which he tossed to and fro, till the small hours of the morning began to grow large. Yet were a night a little eased to his toilet mind, toiling in mere darkness and deceived by questioning. 6 o'clock struck on the bells of the church, and was so conveniently near to Mr. Utton's dwelling, and still he was digging at the problem hitherto. Hitherto it had touched him on the intellectual side alone. Now his imagination were engaged, or rather enslaved, and as he lay and tossed in the gross darkness of the night, in the curtained room, Mr. Enfield's tale went before his mind in a scroll of lighted pictures. He would be aware of a great field of lamps, of an eternal scene, then of the figure of a man walking swiftly, and of a child running from the doctor's, and then these men met, and that human juggernaut trod the child down and passed on regardless of our scream, or else he would see a room in a rich house, where his friend lay asleep, dreaming and smiling at his dream, and then the door of that room would be opened, the curtains of the bed plucked apart, the sleeper recalled, and lo! There would stand by his side a figure whom power would give him, and even at that dead hour he must rise and do its bidding. The figure in these two phases haunted the lawyer all night, and if at any time he dozed over, it were but to see it glide more stealthily through his sleeping hours, or move still more swiftly, even to dizziness, through the wider labyrinth of a lamp-lighted city. And at every street corner crushed a child and needless screaming, and still the figure had no face by which he might know it. Even in his dreams it had no face, one that baffled him and melted before his eyes. And thus it was that they sprang up and grew apiece in the lawyer's mind a singularly strong, almost inordinate curiosity to behold the features of the real Mr. Hyde. If he could but once set eyes upon him, he thought, the mystery would lighten, and perhaps roll altogether away. As with the habit of mysterious things, when well examined, he might see a reason for his friend's strange preference for bondage, call it what you please, and even for the startling clauses of the will. And at least it would be a face worth seeing, the face of disquiet. And he began slowly to mount the street, pausing every. And at least it would be a face worth seeing, the face of a man who was without bowels of mercy, a face which had been to show itself to raise up in the minds of the unpresentable Enfield the spirit of enduring hatred. From that time forward, Mr. Utterson began to haunt the door in the by-street of shops. In the morning before office hours, at noon when business was plenty, and time scarce, at night under the face of the fogged city moon. By all light and at all hours of solitude or concourse, the lawyer would be found on his chosen post. If he be Mr. Hyde, he had thought, I shall be Mr. Seek. At last his patience were rewarded. A refined dry night, frost in the air, and the streets as clean as a ballroom floor. Lamps unshaken by any wind, drawing a regular pattern of light and shadow. At 10 o'clock, when the shops were closed, the by street was very solitary, and, in spite of the low growl of London from all round, very silent. Small sounds carried far, domestic sounds out of the house clearly audible on either side of the roadway, and the rumour of the approach of any passenger preceded him by a long time. Mr. Utterson had been some minutes at his post, when he were aware of an odd light footstep drawing near. In the course of his nightly patrols, he had long grown accustomed to the quaint effect to which the footfalls of a single person, when he is still a great way off, suddenly spring out distinct from the vast unknown clatter of the city. His attention had never been before so sharply and decisively arrested, and with a strong superstitious perversion of success that he withdrew into the entry of the court. The steps drew swiftly nearer, and swelled out suddenly louder as they turned the end of the street. The lawyer, looking forth from the entry, could soon see what manner of man he had to deal with. He was small and very plainly dressed, and the look of him, even at that distance, went somehow strongly against the watcher's inclination. But he made straight for the door, crossing the roadway to save time as he came. He drew a key from his pocket like one approaching home. Mr. Utterson stepped out and touched him on the shoulder as he passed. Mr. Hyde, Mr. Hyde shrank back with an hissing intake of breath, His fear were only momentary, and though he did not look the lawyer in the face, he answered coolly enough, "That is my name. What do you want?" "I see you're going in," returned the lawyer. "I'm an old friend of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Utterson of Gaunt Street. You must have heard my name, and meeting you so conveniently, I thought you might admit me. You will not find Dr. Jekyll here. He is from home," replied Mr. Utterson, blowing in the key, and then suddenly, but still without looking up, "How did you know me?" he asked. "On your side," said Mr. Utterson. "Will you do me a favour?" "With pleasure," replied the other. "What shall it be?" "Will you let me see your face?" asked the lawyer. Mr. Hyde appeared to hesitate, and then, as if upon some sudden reflection, fronting about with an air of defiance, the pair stared at each other pretty fixedly for a few seconds. "Now I shall know you again," said Mr. Utterson. "It may be useful." "Yes," returned Mr. Hyde. "It is well we have met, and apropos you should have my address." He gave a number of a street in Soho. "Good God," Mr. Utterson. Could he too have been thinking of the will? He kept his feelings to himself, and only grunted in acknowledging the address. "And now," said he, "how did you know me?" "A description," was the reply. "Whose description?" "You have common friends," said Mr. Hyde. "Common friends," said Mr. Hyde. "Who are they?" "Jack, for instance," said the lawyer. "He never told you," cried Mr. Hyde with a flush of anger. "I did not think he would lie." "Come," said Mr. Hyde. "That is not fitting language." The other snarled aloud in a savage laugh, and in the next moment, with extraordinary quickness, he had unlocked the door and disappeared into the house. The lawyer stood a while Mr. Hyde left him, a picture of disquiet. Then he began slowly to mount the street, pausing every step or two and putting his hand to his brow like a man in mental perplexity. The problem he was thus debating as he walked was one of a class that is rarely solved. Mr. Hyde was pale and dwarfish. He gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. He had a displeasing smile. He had borne himself to the lawyer as a sort of murderous mixture of timidity and boldness. And he spoke with a husky, whispering, and somewhat broken voice. All these were points against him, but no one altogether could explain the hitherto unknown disgust, loathing, and fear which Mr. Upton regarded him. "There must be something else," said the perplexed gentleman. "There is something, or if I could only find the name for it. But bless me, the man seems hardly human. Something troglodytic, shall we say. It can be all the old story of Dr. Fell. Is the mere radiance of a foul soul that thus transpires through and transfigures its clay continent. The last, I think, for oh my poor old Dr. Harry Jekyll, if ever I read Satan's signature upon a face, it is that on that of your new friend." Round the corner from the bar street there were a square of ancient handsome houses, now for the most part decayed from their high estate and left in flats and chambers to all sorts and conditions of men, map engravers, architects, shady lawyers, and the agents of obscure enterprises. One house, however, the second from the corner, was still occupied entire, and at the door of this, which wore a great air of wealth and comfort, but were now plunged to darkness except for the fair fanlight, Mr. Utton stopped and knocked. A well-dressed elderly servant opened the door. "Is Dr. Jekyll at home, Paul?" asked the lawyer. "I will see you, Mr. Utton," said Paul, admitting the visitor as he spoke into a large, low-roofed, comfortable hall, paved with flags, warmed, after the fashion of a country house, by a bright open fire, and furnished with costly cabinets of oak. "Will you wait here by the fire, sir? I shall give you a light in the dining room." "Here, thank you," said the lawyer. He drew near and leaned on the tall fender. This hall, in which he was now left alone, was a pet fancy of his friends, the doctors, and Utterson himself was wont to speak of it as the pleasantest room in London. But tonight there was a shock in his blood. The face vibe sat heavy on the memory. He felt, what was rare with him, a nausea and distaste alone, and in the gloom of his spirits he seemed to read a menace in the flickering of the firelight on the polished cabinets, and the uneasy starting of the shadow on the roof. He was ashamed with his relief when Paul presently returned to announce that Dr. Jekyll had gone out. "I saw Mr. Hyde go in by the old dissecting room door, Mr. Paul," he said. "Is that quite right, when Dr. Jekyll is from home?" "Quite right, Mr. Utterson," replied the servant. "Mr. Hyde has a key." "Your master seems to repose a great deal of trust in the young man, Paul," resumed the other man musingly. "Yes, sir, he do indeed," said Paul. We have all orders to obey him." "I do not think I ever met Mr. Hyde," said Utterson. "Oh dear, no, sir. He never dined, sir," replied the butler. "Indeed, we see very little of him on this side of the house. He mostly comes and goes by the laboratory." "Well, good night, Paul." "Good night, Mr. Utterson." And the lawyer set out homeward with a very heavy heart. "Poor Harry Jekyll," he thought. "My mind misgives me. He is in deep waters. He was wild when he was young, a long while ago to be sure. In the law of God there is no statute of limitation. I admit must be that, a ghost of some old sin, cancer of some concealed disgrace. Punishment coming pedoclodo, years after memory has forgotten and self-love conditioned the fault. And the law, scared by the thought, feared the while in his own part, groping in all the corners of memory, lest by chance some jack in the box of old iniquity should leap to light there. His past were fairly blameless. Few men could read the rolls of their life with less apprehension. He was humbled to the dust by the many ill things he had done, and raised up again in a sober and fearful gratitude by the many that he had come so near to, yet avoided. And then by a return on his former subject, he conceived a spark of hope. His master eye, if he were studied, though it, thought he, must have secrets of his own. Black secrets, for the look of him, secrets compared to which poor Jekyll's words would be like sunshine. Things cannot continue as they are. It turns me cold to think of this creature stealing like a thief to Harry's bedside. Poor Harry, what awakening! And the danger of it. This hides respects the existence of the will. He may grow impatient to inherit. I must put my shoulder to the wheel. The Jekyll will but let me, he added. The Jekyll will only let me. Once more he saw his mind's eye, clear as transparency, the strange clauses of the will. That's the end of the second chapter. So we're seeing a little something come to light here. We've got this unpleasant character of Jekyll. And apparently this old house is linked with, what am I saying, this old house? This doorway is linked with the doorway of Dr. Jekyll. No, we've got Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll. I'm getting them mixed up now. Yeah, the irreparable Mr. Hyde, and the, I guess trouble. I don't know. I was going to say Dr. Jekyll's an upstanding man, but I guess he's not really, is he? Apparently he's got his own troubled past and he does weird science. Maybe it's not what he thinks. Maybe there's no blackmail on Jekyll. Maybe Jekyll just gets along with Hyde. Could be. Suppose that would be an interesting twist to the story. Could be like the last Stevenson we read, and there's what you call it? Some body snatching going on. Hyde a body snatcher, Jekyll the second or whatever. I don't know. Is there anything else worth mentioning, really? Not talking this one again, but I am trying still to do voices. Let's see if I can hold that up. At any rate, let's get back to it. Dr. Jekyll were quite at ease. A fortnight later, by excellent good fortune, the doctor gave one of his pleasant dinners to the 5 or 6 old cronies, all intelligent, reputable men, and all judges of good wine. Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others had departed. This was no new arrangement, but a thing that had befallen many scores of times where Utterson were liked. Wherein Utterson were liked, he were liked well. Most loved to detail the dry lawyer. When the light-hearted and the loose-tongued had already their foot on the threshold, they liked to sit a while in his unobtrusive company, practising for solitude, sombre in their minds to the man's rich silence after the expense and strain of gaiety. This rule, Dr. Jekyll was no exception, and as he now sat on the opposite side of the fire, a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast perhaps, for every mark of capacity and kindness, you could see by his looks that he cherished Mr. Utterson. He cherished for Mr. Utterson a sincere and warm affection. "I've been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll," began the latter. "You know that will of yours?" A close observer might have gathered that this topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. "My poor Utterson," he said, "you are unfortunate in such a clime. I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it was a hidebound pedant Lanyon on what he called my scientific heresy. I know there's a good fellow, you needn't frown, an excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him, but a hidebound pedant for all that, an ignorant, blatant pedant. You were never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon. You know I never approved of it, as you like." Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. "My will? Yes, certainly, sir. I know that," said the doctor, a trifle sharp. "You've told me so." "I tell you so again," continued the lawyer. "I've been learning something of young Hyde." The large, handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale, and the very lips. There came a blackness about his eyes. "I don't care to hear more," he said. "This is a matter I thought we agreed to drop." "What I heard was abominable," said Utterson. can make no change. You don't understand my position, returned the doctor with a certain incoherency of manner. I'm painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking. Jekyll, said Utterson. You know me, I am a man to be trusted. Make a clean breast of this confidence, and I make no doubt I can get you out of it. My good Utterson, said the doctor. This is very good of you. This is downright good of you, and I cannot find words to thank you. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive, I before myself, if I could make the choice. Indeed, it isn't what you fancy. It is not so bad as that, and it's just to put your good heart to rest. I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. I give you my hand upon that, and I thank you again and again. I will just add one little word, Utterson. I'm sure you'll take a good part. This is a private matter, and I beg of you to let it sleep. Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. I have no doubt you're perfectly right, he said at last, getting to his feet. Well, but since we have touched upon this business, and for the last time I hope, continued the doctor, there is one point I should like you to understand. I have really a very great interest in poor Hyde. I know you have seen him, he told me so, and I fear he was rude. But I do sincerely take a very great interest in that young man. If I am taking away Utterson, I wish you to promise me that you would bear with him and get him his rights for him. I think you would, if you knew all, and it would be a weight off my mind if you would promise. I can't pretend that I shall ever like him, said the lawyer. I don't ask that, pleaded Jekyll, laying his hand upon the other's arm. I only ask for justice. I only ask you to help him for my sake when I am no longer here. Utterson heaved an irrepressible sigh. Well, he said, I promise. Oh, and that's the end of that chapter. I don't feel that these chapters are evenly spaced now, I can't believe, but still. Yeah, I don't think there's enough there to comment on, so I'm just going to press on. The Casae murder case. Nearly a year later, in the month of October 18th, London was startled by a crime of significant ferocity and rendered all the more notable by the opposition of the victim. The details were few and startling. A maidservant living alone in a house not far from the river had gone upstairs. Oh, hang on a second, I'll get an alarm. Sorry about that. Beast is getting more restless, it seems. Right. A maidservant living alone in a house not far from the river had gone upstairs to bed about 11. Though a fog rolled over the city in the small hours, the early part of the night were cloudless, and the lane, which the maid's window overlooked, was brilliantly lit by the full moon. It seemed she were romantically given as she sat down upon her box, which stood immediately under the window, and fell into a dream of music. Never, she used to say, was streaming tears when she narrated the experience. Never had she felt more at peace with all men, or thought more kindly of the world. And as she so sat, she became aware of an aged and beautiful gentleman with white hair drawing near along the lane, and advancing to meet him another and very small gentleman, to whom at first she paid less attention. When they had come within speech, which was just under the maid's eye, the older man bowed and accosted the other with a very pretty manner of politeness. It did not seem as if the subject was addressed were of great importance. Indeed, from his pointing, it sometimes appeared as if he were only inquiring his way. The moon shone in his face as he spoke, and the girl was pleased to watch it. It seemed to breathe such an innocent and old-world kindness of disposition. Yet with some art, too, as of a well-founded self-contempt. Presently her eye wandered to the other, and she was surprised to recognise in him a certain Mr. R, who had once visited her master and for whom she had conceived a dislike. He had in his hand an heavy cane, which she would trifle. He answered never a word, and seemed to listen with an ill-contained impatience. And then all of a sudden he broke out in a great flame of anger, stamping with his foot, brandishing the cane and carrying on, as the maid described it, like a madman. The old gentleman took a step back, with the air of one very much surprised and a trifle hurt. And at that Mr. R broke out of all bounds and clubbed him to the earth. And the next moment, with ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot, and hauling him down a storm of blows under which the bones were audibly shattered, and the body jumped upon the roadway. At the order of these sights and sounds, the maid fainted. It was 2 o'clock when she came to herself and called for the police. The murderer had gone long ago. There lay his victim in the middle of the lane, incredibly mangled. The stick for which the deed had been done, though it was some rare and very tough and heavy wood, had broken in the middle under the stress of this insensate cruelty, and one splintered half had been rolled in the neighbouring gutter. The other, without a doubt, had been carried away by the murderer. A purse and gold watch were found upon the victim, but no cards or papers except a sealed and stamped envelope, which he had been probably carrying in the post, and which bore a name addressed to Mr. Utterson. This was brought to by the lawyer the next morning, before he were out of his bed. He had no sooner seen it, and been told the circumstances, than he shot out a solemn lip. "I shall say nothing till I have seen the body," said he. "This may be very serious. Have the kindness to wait while I dress." With the same grave countenance, he hurried through his breakfast and drove to the police station, whither the body had been carried. As soon as he came into his cell, he nodded. "Yes," he said, "I recognise him. I'm sorry to say this is Sir Danvers Carroll." "Good God, sir!" exclaimed the officer. "Is that possible?" The next moment his eyes lighted up with professional ambition. "This will make a deal of noise," he said. "Perhaps you can help us to the man." They briefly narrated what the maid had seen, and showed the broken stick. Mr. Utterson had already quailed at the name iron. When the stick was laid before him, he could doubt no longer. Broken and battered as it was, he recognised it for one that he himself had presented many years before to Henry Jekyll. "Is Mr. Hyde a person of small stature?" he inquired. "Particularly small and particularly wicked looking, is what the maid calls him," said the officer. Mr. Utterson reflected, and then, raising his head, "If you will come with me in my cab," he said, "I think I can take you to his house." But by this time, about 9 in the morning, in the first fog of the season, a great chocolate-coloured pool lowered over the Avon, and the wind was continually changing the mountains in battle with vapours, so that the cab crawled from street to street. Mr. Utterson beheld a marvellous number of degrees and hues of twilight. Here it would be dark at the black end of the evening, and there it would be a glow of rich lurid brown, like the light of some strange conflagration. And here, for a moment, the fog would be quite broken up, and haggard shafts of the daylight would glance in between the swirling reeds. The dismal quarter of Soho, seen under these changing glimpses, with its muddy ways and slanting passages, its lamps which had never been extinguished, and kindly or kindled afresh to combat this mournful re-invasion of darkness, seemed in the lawyer's eyes like a district of some city in a nightmare. The thought of his mind, beside, were of gloomiest dye, and when he glanced at the companion of his drive, we were unconscious of some touch of that terror to the law, or the law and the law's officers, which may at times assail the most of us. As the cab drew up before the address indicated, the fog lifted a little and showed him a dingy street, a gin palace, a low French eating house, a shop for the retail of penny numbers and twopenny salads, many ragged children huddled in doorways, and many women of many different nationalities passing out, key in hand, to have morning glass. And the next moment the fog settled down again upon that path, as brown and umber, and cut him off from his black, godly surroundings. This was the home of Henry Jekyll's favourite, of a man who were heir to £250,000 sterling. An ivory-faced and silvery-haired old woman opened the door. She had an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. "Yes," she said, from Mr. Hyde's house, "but you were not at home. You'd been in that night very late, and he had gone away again in less than an hour. There was nothing strange in that. His habits were very irregular, and they were often absent for instance, it was nearly 2 months since she had seen him till yesterday." "Very well, then, we wish to see his room," said the lawyer, and when the woman began to declare it were impossible, "I'd better tell you who the person is," he added. "This is Inspector Newcombe of Scotland Yard." A flash of odious joy appeared upon the woman's face. "Ah," she said, "he is in trouble. What has he done?" Mr. Utterson and the inspector exchanged glances. "He doesn't seem a very popular character," observed the latter. "And now, my good woman, just let me and this gentleman have a look about us." The whole extent of the house, which but for the old woman remained otherwise empty, Mr. Hyde had only used a couple of rooms. These were furnished with luxury and good taste. The closet were filled with wine, the plate was silver, the napery elegant, a good picture hung upon the walls, a gift, as I suppose, from Henry Jekyll, who was much of a connoisseur, and the carpets were in many plies and agreeable in colour. At this moment, however, the room bore every mark of having been recently and hurriedly ransacked. Clothes lay about the floor with their pockets inside out, lock-fast drawers stood open, and on the hearth there lay a pile of grey ashes, as though many papers had been burned. From these embers the inspector disinterred the butt end of a green cheque-book, which had raised the action of the fire, or resisted the action of the fire. The other after the stick were found behind the door. As if this quenched his suspicions, the officer declared himself delighted. A visit to the bank, where several £1,000s were found to be lying in the murderer's credit, completed his gratification. "You may depend upon it, sir," he told Mr. Edison. "I have him in my hand. He must have lost his head, or he would never have left the stick, or above all, burned the checkbook. I'm on his life to that man. You have nothing to do but wait for him to our bank and get out the handbills." This last, however, were not so easy of accomplishment, for Mr. Hyde had numbered few familiars. Even the master of the servant maid had only seen him twice. His family could nowhere be traced. He had never been photographed, and the few who could describe him differed widely, as common observers will. On only one point where they agreed, and that was the wanton sense of unexpressed deformity with which the fugitive impressed his beholders. And that's the end of that chapter. There. Murderous fellow then, this Mr. Hyde. Trying to think what else to say, really. I don't know. There's definitely something going on here, but it's hard to say exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Let me have a little drink of water and then I'll think on it. These are quite short chapters as it runs. Right, let's see. So first things first, there's definitely something going on with his whole identity here. In doing this disappearing act for 2 months at a time and coming and going from Jekyll's lab. I wonder if he's a ghost or something, conjured up. Not sure, really. Jekyll definitely has something of a care for him. No, I really can't place it. I mean, I think the whole point is it's a mystery. I don't know the answer, so I can't really speculate very well upon it. I expect this is one of those books that hopefully will all come together near the end. I must say, Mr. Hudson's an unusual character in and of himself, I suppose, being the last friend to the departed. He seems very judgmental immediately of this Jekyll. Seems at odds with himself, though. Still. I suppose he doesn't know Jekyll. He's not a friend who's fallen into bad times. He's just a stranger who seemingly has something over a friend of his. So. Can't hold it. Yeah. Let's press on for a bit, Hopefully we'll get something out of it. Oh. Maybe not. That sounds like a beast to me. I thought I dodged it, but if it's doubling back, I might have to leave you be for a little while. So I will see you in a couple of minutes. Excuse me. Alright, I think we're in the clear. Oh, sorry, the beast has been a bit more active of late. Yeah, that was some great pile of claws and sinew. No idea what it's meant to be. But it was pretty bloody awful, so I'll try and keep it down for a minute or two. I think we finished talking about whatever we're going to talk about, so we'll just get back into it, really. Oh, I hate when that happens. Right. Incident with the letter. It was late in the afternoon when Mr. Utterson found his way to Dr. Jekyll's door. We were at once admitted by Paul and carried down by the kitchen offices and across a yard, which had once been a garden and a building, that were indifferently known as the laboratory, the dissecting rooms. The doctor had bought the house from the heirs of a celebrated surgeon, and his own taste being rather chemical and anatomical, he had changed the destination of the block at the bottom of the garden. For the first time, a lawyer had been received in that part of his friend's quarters, and he eyed the dingy windowless structure with curiosity, and gazed round with distasteful sense of strangeness as he crossed the theatre, once crowded with eager students, and now lying gaunt and silent, the tables laden with chemical apparatuses, the floor strewn with crates and littered with pack and straw, and the light falling dimly through the foggy cupola. At the further end, a flight of stairs mounted up to a door covered with red baize, and through this Mr. Utterson were at last received into the doctor's cabinet. It was a large room, fitted round with glass presses, furnished, among other things, with cheval glass, and a business table, and looking out upon the court by 3 dusty windows barbed with iron. The fire burned in the grate. A lamp was set lighted on the chimney shelf, for even on the house the fog began to lie thickly, and there, close up to the warmth, sat Dr. Jekyll, looking deadly sick. He did not rise to meet his visitor, but held out a cold hand and bade him welcome in a changed voice. "And now," said Mr. Utterson, as soon as Paul had left him, "you've heard the news?" The doctor shuddered. "They were crying it in the square," he said. "I heard them and went dining room." "One word," said the lawyer. "Carroll was my client. So are you. I want to know what I'm doing. You've not been mad enough to hide the fellow." "Utterson, I swear to God," cried the doctor, "I swear to God I will never set eyes on him again. I bind my honour to you that I am done with him in this world. It is all at an end, and indeed he does not want my help. I don't know him as I did. He is safe, he is quite safe, not my word. He will never more be heard of." The lawyer listened gloomily. He did not like his friend's feverish manner. "You seem pretty sure of him," he said. "But for your sake I hope you may be right. If you came to a trial, your name may appear." "I am quite sure of him," replied Jekyll. "I have grounds for certainty that I cannot share with anyone. There is one thing in which you may advise me. I have received a letter, and I am at a loss whether I should show it to the police. I should like to leave it in your hands, Utterson. You would judge wisely, I am sure. I have so great trust in you." "You fear, I suppose, that it might lead to his detection?" asked the lawyer. "No," said the other. "I cannot say that I care one whit what comes of Hyde. I am quite done with him. I was thinking of my own character, which this hateful business is rather exposed." Utterson ruminated a while. He was surprised at his friend's selfishness, and yet relieved by it. "Well," he said at last, "let me see the letter." The letter was written in odd, upright hand and signed Edward R. It signed, briefly enough, that the writer's benefactor, Dr. Jekyll, whom he had long so unworthily repaid for 1,000 generosities, need labour under no alarm for his safety, as he had means of escape, on which he placed a sure dependence. The lawyer liked this letter well enough. It put a better colour on the intimacy than he had looked for, and he blamed himself for some of his past suspicions. "Have you the envelope?" he asked. "I burned it," replied Jekyll, "before I thought what I was about. It bore no postmark, and it was handed in." "Shall I keep this and sleep upon this?" asked Utterson. "I wish you to judge for me entirely," was the reply. "I have lost confidence in myself." "Well, I shall consider," returned the lawyer. "And now one word more. It was Hyde who detained the terms in your will about that disappearance." The doctor seemed seized with a qualm of faintness. He shut his mouth tight and nodded. "I knew it," said Utterson. "I meant to murder you. You have a fine escape." "I have had what is far more to the purpose," returned the doctor solemnly. "I have had a lesson. Oh God, Utterson, what a lesson I have had." He covered his face for a moment with his hands. On his way out, the lawyer stopped and had a word or two with Paul. "By the by," he said, "there was a letter handed in today. What was the messenger like?" Paul was positive nothing had come except by post, and only circulars by that, he added. News sent off the visitor with his fears renewed. Plainly the letter had come by the laboratory door, possibly indeed it had been written on the cabinet, in the cabinet, and if that was so, it must be differently judged, and handled with more caution. The newsboys who went were crying themselves hoarse at the foot along the footway. Special edition, shocking murder in MP. The funeral oration of one friend and client, and they could not help certain apprehension lest the good name of another should be sucked down into the eddy of the scandal. It were at least a ticklish decision he had to make, and self-reliant as he was by habit, he began to cherish a longing for advice. It were not to be had directly, but perhaps he thought it might be fished for. Presently after, he sat on one side of his own hearth, and Mr. Guest, his head clerk, on the other, and midway between, as a nicely cabinet distance from the fire, a bottle of a particular old wine that had long dwelt unsunned in the foundations of his house. The fog still slept on the wing above the drowned city, where the lamps glimmered like carbuncles, and through the muffle and smother of these fallen clouds, the procession of the town's life was still rolling in through the great arteries, with a sound of a mighty wind. But the room was glay with firelight. In the bottle the acids were long ago resolved. Imperial dye had softened with time, as the colour grew richer in stained windows, and the glow of hot water afternoons on hillside vineyards were ready to be set free to disperse into the fogs of London. Insensibly the lawyer melted. There were no man for whom he kept fewer secrets than Mr. Guest. They were not always sure that he kept as many as he meant. Guest had often been on business to the doctors. He knew Paul. He could scarce have failed to hear Mr. Hyde's familiarity about the house. He might draw conclusions. Was it not as well, then, that he should see a letter which put the mystery to rights? And above all, since Guest, being a great student and critic of handwriting, would consider the step natural and obliging. The clerk, beside, were a man of counsel. He would scarce read so strange a document without dropping a remark, and by that remark Mr. Utterson might shape his future course. This is a sad business about Sir Danvers, he said. Yes, sir, indeed it is. There's elicited a great deal of public feeling, returned Guest. The man, of course, was mad. I should like to hear your views on that, replied Utterson. I have a document here in his handwriting, betwixt ourselves, although I scarce know what to do about it. It is an ugly business at the best. But there it is, quite in your way, the murderer's autograph. Guest's eyes brightened, and he sat down, and studied it with passion. No, sir, he said, not mad, but an odd hand. And by all accounts a very odd writer, said the lawyer. Just then the servant entered with a note. That from Dr. Jekyll, sir, inquired the clerk. I thought I knew his writing. Anything private, Mr. Dodson? Any invitation to dinner? Why? You want to see it? One moment, I thank you, sir. The clerk laid the 2 sheets of paper alongside. The servant sedulously compared their contents. Thank you, sir, said at last, returned both. It was very interesting autograph. There were a pause, during which Mr. Utterson struggled with himself. How did you compare them, Guest? He inquired suddenly. Well, sir, returned the clerk, there's a rather singular resemblance. The 2 hands are in many points identical, only differently sloped. Rather quaint, said I. It has, as you say, rather quaint, returned Guest. I wouldn't speak of this night. I wouldn't speak of this night, you know, said the last time. No, sir, said the clerk, I understand. No sooner was Mr. Utterson alone that night than he locked the note in his safe, where it reposed from that time forward. What, he thought, Henry Jekyll forged for a murderer? His blood ran cold in his veins. I'm struggling a bit with this one, it seems. Maybe I'm a little more nervous of the beast than I realised. Still, let's see what we can make of it. It does seem that once you've got Jekyll revolved with the weird grabs. Still. I'm trying to think what else there is to it. I mean, it's strange that you forge him a note, but I don't know, man. It is being set up as a mystery. It could be a simple twist as like what he taught in the right, or I guess maybe he's Hyde is Jekyll's long lost son or something, and they have some sort of family connection that means their hands are similar. I don't know. They're described quite differently, so maybe not. Let's push on. Actually, well, let's have some water first, shall we go? care for my throat. Must admit I'm a bit compelled by this, as I'm pushing faster than I would otherwise. Slow and steady, Skitter. Remarkable incident of Dr. Lanyon. Time ran on. Thousands of pounds were offered in reward for the death of Sir Danvers was presented as a public injury. Mr. Hyde had disappeared out of the ken of the police, as though it had never existed. Much of his past were unearthed, indeed, and all disreputable. Tales came out of the man's cruelty, at once so callous and violent, of his vile life, of his strange associates, the hatred that seemed to have surrounded his career, but of his present whereabouts not a whisper. From the time he had left the house in Soho on the morning of the murder, he was simply blotted out. And gradually, as time grew on, Mr. Utterson began to recover from the outburst of his alarm, and to grow more quiet with himself. The death of Sir Danvers was, to his way of thinking, more than painful by the disappearance of Mr. Hyde. Now that evil influence had been withdrawn, a new life began for Dr. Jekyll. He came out of his seclusion, renewed relations with his friends, became once more their familiar guest and entertainer, and whilst he had always been known for charities, he was now no less distinguished for religion. He were busy, he were much in the open air, and he did good. His face seemed to open and brighten, as if with inward consciousness of service, and for more than 2 months the doctor were at peace. On the 8th of January, Utterson had dined at the doctor's with a small party. Lanyon had been there, and the face of the host looked from one to the other, as in the old days, when the trio were inseparable friends. On the 12th, and again on the 14th, the door was shut against the lawyer. The doctor was confined to the house. The doctor was confined to the house, also, and saw no one. On the 15th, he tried again, and were again refused. And having now been used for the last 2 months to see his friend almost daily, he found this return of solitude the way upon his spirits. The 5th night, he had in guests to dine with him, and the 6th he betook himself to Dr. Lanyon's. There at least he was not denied admittance. When he came in, he was shocked at the change which had taken place in the doctor's appearance. He had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. The rosy man had grown pale, his flesh had fallen away, and was visibly bolder and older. Yet were not so much these tokens of swift physical decay that arrested Lanyon's notice, as a look in the eye and quality of manner that seemed to testify some deep-seated terror of the mind. It were unlikely that the doctor should fear death, and yet that was what Utterson was tempted to suspect. Yes, he is a doctor, he must know his own state and that his days are counted, and the knowledge is more than he can bear. And yet where Utterson remarked on his ill looks, it were with an air of great firmness that Lanyon declared himself a doomed man. "They have had a shock," he said, "and they shall never recover. It is a question of weeks. Their life has been pleasant. I liked it, yes, sir, I used to like it, and sometimes think if we knew all, we should be more glad to get away." "Jekyll is ill too," observed Utterson. "You seen him?" Lanyon's face changed, and he held a trembling hand. I wish to see or hear no more of Dr. Jekyll," he said in a loud, unsteady voice. "I am quite done with that person, and I beg you will spare me any allusion to one whom I regard as dead." "Tut, said Mr. Utterson. And then, after considerable pause, "Can't I do anything?" he inquired. "We are 3 very old friends, Lanyon. We should not live to wait others." "Nothing can be done," returned Lanyon. "Ask himself." "He will not see me," said the lawyer. "I am not surprised at that," was the reply. "Some day, Utterson, after I am dead, you may perhaps come to learn the right and wrong of this. I cannot tell you. In the meantime, if you can sit and talk with me of other things, for God's sake, stay and do so. If you cannot keep clear of the accursed topic, in God's name, go, for I cannot bear it." As soon as he got home, Utterson sat down and wrote to Jekyll, complaining of his exclusion from the house, and asking the cause of this unhappy break with Lanyon. And the next day brought him a long answer, often very pathetically worded, and sometimes darkly mysterious in drift. The quarrel with Lanyon was incurable. "I do not blame our old friend," Jekyll wrote, "but I share the view that we must never meet. I mean from henceforth to lead a life of extreme seclusion. You must not be surprised, nor must you doubt my friendship, but the door is often shut even to you. You must suffer me to go my own dark ways. I have brought on myself a punishment and a danger that I cannot name. If I am the chief of sinners, I am the chief of sufferers also. I could not think that this earth contained a place for suffering and terrors so unmanly. And you can do but one thing, Utterson, to lighten this destiny, and that is to respect my silence." Utterson were amazed. The dark influence of ire had been withdrawn. The doctor had returned to his old tasks and amenities. A week ago, the prospect had smiled with every promise of a cheerful and honoured age. And now, in a moment, friendship and peace of mind and the old tenor of his life were wrecked. So great and unprepared a change pointed to the madness. To view Lanion's manner and word, there must lie for it some deeper ground. A week afterwards, Dr. Lanyon took to his bed, and in something less than a fortnight he was dead. The night after the funeral, which he had been sadly affected, Arthur locked the door of his business room, and sitting by the light of a melancholy candle, drew out and set before him an envelope, addressed by the hand, and sealed with the seal of his dear friend. Private, in the hands of J. G. Utterson alone, in case of his presence, to be destroyed unread, though it was emphatically superscribed, and the Lord dreaded to behold the contents. I buried one friend today, he thought. What if this should cost me another? When he condemned the fearers of disloyalty and broke the seal. Within there were another enclosure likewise sealed and marked upon the cover, not to be opened until the death or disappearance of Dr. Henry Jekyll. Arthur could not trust his eyes. It was disappearance, here again, as in the mad will which he had long ago restored to its author. Here again with the idea of disappearance and the name Henry Jekyll bracketed. In the will, that idea had sprung from the sinister suggestion of the man Iron. It was set there with a purpose, all too plain and horrible. Written by the hand of Dr. Lanyon, what should it mean? A great curiosity came upon the trustee to disregard the prohibition and dive at once into the bottom of the mystery. The professional honour and faith to his dead friend were stringent obligations, and the packet slept in the innermost corner of his private safe. It is one thing to mortify curiosity, another to conquer it. It may be doubted from that day forth, Arthur desired the society of his surviving friend with the same eagerness. He thought of him kindly, his thoughts were disquieted and fearful. He went to call indeed, that he were perhaps relieved to be denied admittance. Perhaps in his art he referred to speak with Paul upon the doorstep, surrounded by the air and sound of the open city, rather than be admitted into that house of voluntary bondage, and sent to speak with its inscrutable recluse. Paul had indeed no very pleasant news to communicate. The doctor appeared, now more than ever, confined himself to the cabinet over the laboratory, where he would sometimes even sleep. He was out of spirits, grown very silent, he did not read. It seemed as if he had something on his mind. Hudson became so used to the unvarying characteristic of Reeves' reports that he fell off little by little in the frequency of his visits. What's in that chap? So something going on. Something disquieting enough that Lanyon died just from the shock of it. So I'm guessing there's some sort of, I don't know, something uncanny about iron. I was thinking it was something to do with what's called the dead body snatchers, but Jekyll isn't a physician, he's a chemist. I know that there's certain reagents that can be used in the conjuring of things, so maybe it's some sort of ghost thing. But I couldn't say for sure. I think it's something strange about it. Anyway, maybe it's something a bit more mundane. Maybe he just murdered Iron to get away from his sort of connection to it. I guess that could still line up with some of the other stuff. Iron being his son and him caring for him and raising him, and then murdering him to hide their connection and something, and then Lanyon finds him dissolving the body in acid or whatever. That'd be a good little picture. Don't know if it would shock a man up to death, but it might well, especially an older man. And one so proper and put together as Lanyon seems to be. There's also the talk of the unscientific principles. That's what really makes me mind that something is weird about what's got hard. And there's also the sort of way everyone seems to find him sinister. I think he's some sort of spooky thing, but I can't put my finger on it for sure. Can't put my finger on it for sure. Let's have a drink. Water. Yeah, man, that's for sure. I do am captivated by the mystery. I won't get to know the end until I've finished reading it. So. Incident at the window. It chanced on Sunday, Mr. Utterson on his usual walk with Mr. Enfield, they lay once again through the bar street, and that when they came in front of the door, both stopped to gaze on it. Well, said Mr. Enfield, that story is at an end at least. We shall never see more of Mr. Hyde. I hope not, said Utterson. I would tell you that I once saw him and shared your feeling of repulsion. It was impossible to do the one without the other, replied Enfield. By the way, what mash you must have thought me not to know this was a back way to Dr. Jekyll. Partly your own fault that I found out, even when I did. So you found out, did you? Said Utterson. That beast, Sir, we may step into the court and take a look at the window. To tell you the truth, I am uneasy about poor Jekyll, and even outside I feel as if the presence of a friend like you could. The court were very cool and a little damp, and full of premature twilight, although the sky high up overhead was still bright with sunset. The middle one of the three windows was halfway open, and sitting close beside it, taking the air with an infinite sadness and mien, and some disconsolate prisoner, Utterson saw Dr. Jekyll. What, Jekyll? I trust you are better? I am very low, Utterson, replied the doctor gravely. Very low. It will not last long, thank God. Stay too much indoors, said the lawyer. I should be out whipping the circulation like Mr. Enfield. This is my cousin, Mr. Enfield. Come now, get your hat and take a quick turn with us. You're very good, said the other man. I should like to very much. No, it's quite impossible. I dare not. Indeed, Utterson, I am very glad to see you. This really is a great pleasure. I would ask you and Mr. Enfield up. The place really is not fit. Why then, said the lawyer good-naturedly. The best thing we can do is stay down here and speak with you from where we are. That is just what I was about to venture to propose, returned the doctor with a smile. But the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face, and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze the very blood of the two gentlemen below. They saw it but for a glimpse, and the window were instantly thrust down. That glimpse had been sufficient, and they turned and left the courtyard without a word. In silence, too, they traversed the bar street. They were not until they had come to a neighbouring thoroughfare, when even upon a Sunday there was still some stir and to laugh. Mr. Utterson at last turned and looked at his companion. They were both pale, and there were an answering horror in their eyes. God forgive us, said Mr. Utterson. Mr. Enfield only nodded his head very seriously, and walked on once more in silence. That's the end of that chapter. I'm not even going to try and... That was just a teaser. I'm going to keep going. Perhaps there's something up with the walls. Hang on. Man. Right. Back to it. Right. Last night, Mr. Utterson was sitting by his fireside one evening after dinner, when he was surprised to receive a visit from Paul. That's me, Paul. What brings you here? He cried. And taking a second to look at him. What ails you? He added. Is the doctor ill? Mr. Utterson, said the man. There is something wrong. Take a seat, and here's a glass of wine for you, said the lawyer. Take your time and tell me plainly what you want. You know the doctor's ways, sir, replied Paul. Now he shuts himself up. Well, he shut up again in the cabin, and I don't like it, sir. I wish I might die if I liked it. Mr. Utterson, sir, I'm afraid. Now, my good man, said the lawyer. Be explicit. What are you afraid of? I've been afraid for about 2 weeks, returned Paul, doggedly disregarding the question. I can bear it no more. Now, his appearance simply bore out his words. His manner were altered for the worse. Except for the moment when he had first announced his terror, he had not once looked the lawyer in the face. Even now he sat with a glass of wine untasted on his knee, and his eyes directed to the corner of the floor. I can bear it no more, he repeated. Come, said the lawyer. I see you have some good reason, Paul. I see there is something seriously amiss. Try to tell me what it is. I think there's been foul play, said Paul hoarsely. Foul play, cried the lawyer, a good deal frightened and rather inclined to be irritated in consequence. What foul play? What does the man mean? I daren't say, sir, was the answer. Will you come along with me and see for yourself? Mr. Utterson's only answer was to rise and get his hat and great coat. He observed with wonder the greatness of the relief that appeared upon the butler's face, and perhaps with no less that the wine was still untasted when he set it down to follow. It was a wild, cold, seasonable night of March, with pale moon lying on her back as though the wind had tilted her. A flying rack of the most diaphanous and lawny texture. The wind made talking difficult, and reflect the blood in her face. It seemed to have swept the street unusually bare of passengers. Aside from Mr. Utterson, though he had never seen that part of London so deserted. He could have wished it otherwise. Never in his life had he been conscious of so sharp a wish to see and touch his fellow creatures, to struggle as he might, there were borne in upon his mind a crushing anticipation of calamity. The square, when they got there, were all full of wind and on dust, and the thin trees in the garden were lashing themselves along the railing. Paul, who had kept all the way a pace or two ahead, now pulled up in the middle of the pavement, and in spite of the biting weather, took off his hat and mopped his brow with a red-pocket handkerchief. For all the hurry of his coming, these were not the dews of exertion that he wiped away, the moisture of some strange language. His face was white, and his voice, when he spoke, harsh and broken. "Well, sir," he said, "here we are, and God grant there be nothing wrong." "Amen," said the lawyer. Thereupon the servant knocked in a very guarded manner. The door opened on the chain. A voice asked from within, "Is that you, Paul?" "It's all right," said Paul. "Open the door." The hall, when they entered it, were brightly lit, lighted up. The fire was built high. About the hearth, the whole of the servants, men and women, stood huddled together, like a flock of sheep. At the sight of Mr. Hutton, the housemaid broke into hysterical whimpering, and the cook cried out, "Bless the Scarlet's Mother Hudson!" Ran forward as if to take him into her arms. What? You all here?" said the lawyer peevishly. "Very irregular, very unseemly. Your master would be far from pleased." "They're afraid," said Paul. Blank silence followed, no one protesting. Only the maid lifting up her voice and now wept loudly. "Hold your tongue," Paul said to her. Ferocity of accent so testified to his own jangled nerves. And indeed, when the girl had suddenly raised a note of her lamentation, they had all started, turned towards the inner door with faces of dreadful expectation. "And now," concluded the butler, addressing the knife boy, "fetch me a candle, and we'll get this through our hands at once." And then he begged Mr. Hudson to follow him and led the way back to the back garden. "Now, sir," he said, "you come as gently as you can. I want you to hear, and I don't want you to be heard. And see here, sir, if by any chance it was to ask you in, don't go." Mr. Hudson's nerves, at this unlooked-for termination, gave a jerk that nearly threw him from his balance. But he recollected his courage, and followed the butler into the laboratory building and through the surgical theatre, with its lumber of crates and bottles, to the foot of the stair. Here, Paul motioned him to stand on one side and listen, while he himself, setting down the candle and making a great and obvious call on his resolution, mounted the steps and knocked with a somewhat uncertain hand on the rent-glazed cabinet door. "Mr. Hudson, sir, asking to see you," he called, and even as he did so, once more violently signed to the lawyer to give ear. A voice answered from within. "Tell him I cannot see anyone," he said complainingly. "Ain't you, sir?" said Paul, a note of something like triumph in his voice. And taking up his candle, he led Mr. Hudson back across the yard and into the great kitchen, where the fire were out and the beetles were leaping on the floor. "Sir," he said, looking at Mr. Hudson in the eyes, "was that my master's voice?" "It seems much changed," replied the lawyer, very pale but giving a look for look. "Changed? Well, yes, I think so," said the butler. "Have I been 20 years in this man's house to be deceived about his voice? No, sir. Master's made away with. You were made away with 8 days ago when we heard him cry out upon the name of God. And who's in there instead of him, and why it stays there? This thing that cries to heaven, Mr. Hudson." "This is a very strange tale, Paul. A rather wild tale, my man," said Mr. Hudson, biting his finger. "Suppose it were as you suppose. Supposing Dr. Jekyll to have been, well, murdered. What could induce the murderer to stay? It won't hold water. It doesn't commend itself to reason." "Well, Mr. Hudson, you're a hard man to satisfy, but I'll do it yet," said Paul. "All this last week, you must know, him or it, or whatever it is that lives in that cabinet, has been crying night and day some sort of medicine and cannot get it at mine. It was sometimes his way, the master said, is to write his orders on sheets of paper and throw it in the air on the stair. We've had nothing else this week back, nothing but papers and a closed door. The very meals left there that we smuggled in when nobody were looking. As for every day, and twice and thrice in the same day, there have been orders and complaints. And I've been set flying all the wholesale chemists in town. Every time I brought the stuff back there, there'd be another paper telling me to return it, as it was not pure, and another order to a different firm. The drug is wanted bitter bad, sir, whatever for." "Have you any of these papers?" asked Hudson. Paul felt in his pocket and handed a crumpled note, which the lawyer, bending nearer the candle, carefully examined. Its contents ran thus: "Dr. Jekyll presents his compliments to Messrs. Moore. He assures them that the last sample is impure and quite useless for his present purposes. In the year 18, Dr. J purchased a somewhat larger quantity from Messrs. M. He now begs them to search with the most sedulous care, should any of that same quality be left, to forward it to him at once. Expense is no consideration. The importance of this to Dr. J can hardly be exaggerated. So far the letter had run composedly enough, but here was a sudden splutter of the pen. The writer's emotions had broken loose. For God's sake, you, find me some of the old. This is a strange man, said Mr. Hudson, and then shut it. How do you come to have it open? The man it was a main angry, sir, and he threw it back to me like so much dirt, returned Paul. This is unquestionably the doctor's hand, you know, resumed the lawyer. I thought it looked like it, said the servant rather sulkily, and then with another voice. What man's hands are right, he said. I've seen him. Seen him? Replied Mr. Hudson. Well, that's it, said Paul. For this way I came suddenly into the theatre from the garden. It seems to have slipped out the look of this drug or whatever it is. The cabinet door were open, and there he was at the far end of the room, digging among the crates. I looked up when I came in, gave a kind of cry, and went upstairs into the cabinet. For what 1 minute, sir, I saw him. The hair stood upon my head like quills, sir. If that were my master, why he would know why he had a mask upon his face. If it were my master, why did it cry out like a rat and run from me? I served him long enough, and then... Anne paused and pressed his hand over his face. These are all very strange circumstances, said Mr. Hudson. But I think I begin to see daylight. Your master, Paul, is plainly seized with one of those maladies that both torture and deform the sufferer. Hence, for aught I know, the alteration of his voice. Hence the mask of his avoidance of his friend. Hence his eagerness to find the drug by means of which the poor soul retains some hope of recovery. God grant that he not be deceived. There is my explanation. It is sad enough, Paul, and appealing to consider, is it plain and natural, hangs well together, and delivers from us all exorbitant alarms. Sir, said the butler, turning to a sort of modern power, I think we're not my master, and there's the truth. My master, here he looked round him and began to whisper. He's tall, farm-built a man, sir. This were more a dwarf. Marston attempted to protest. Oh, sir, cried Paul, you think I do not know my master after 20 years? You think I do not know where he head comes above the cabinet door? Where I saw him every morning of my life? No, sir. That thing in the mask was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was never Dr. Jekyll. And it's the belief of my aunt that there were a murder done. Paul, replied the lawyer, if you say that, it will become my duty to make certain. Much as I desire to spare your master's feelings, much as I am puzzled by this note, which seems to prove him to be still alive, I shall consider it my duty to break in that door. Ah, Mr. Hudson, that's talking, cried the butler. Now comes the second question, resumed Hudson. Who was going to do it? Why, you and me, sir, was the undaunted reply. That is very well said, returned the lawyer. Whatever comes of it, I shall make it my business to see you are no loser. There is an axe in the theatre, continued Paul, and you might take the kitchen poker for yourself. The lawyer took that rude, weighty instrument in his hand and balanced it. You know, Paul, he said, looking up, you and I are about to place ourselves in a position of some peril. You may so, sir, indeed, returned the butler. As well, then, we should be frank, said the other. We both think more than we have said. Let's make a clean breast. This masked figure that you saw, did you recognise it? Well, sir, it went so quick, and the creature was doubled up, so I could hardly swear to that, was the answer. But if you mean, was it Mr. Iron? Oh, yes, I think it was. You see, it was much of the same bigness, and the same quick, light way with it. And then who else could have got in by the laboratory door? You've not forgot, sir, that at the time of the murder he still had the key with him. That's not all. I don't know Mr. Hudson, if you ever met this Mr. Iron. Yes, said the lawyer. I once spoke with him. And he must know as well as the rest of it. There was something queer about that gentleman. Something that gave a man a turn. I don't rightly know how to say it, sir, beyond this. You felt it in your marrow. Kind of cold and thin. I own I felt something of what you described, said Mr. Hudson. Quite so, sir, returned Paul. When that masked thing, like a monkey, jumped from among the chemicals and whipped into the cabinet, it went down my spine like ice. Oh, I know it's not evidence, Mr. Hunt. But I shouldn't have book learned enough for that. That man has his feelings. I'll give you my Bible word, Mr. Iron. Aye, said the lawyer. My fears incline me to the same point. Evil, I fear, founded. Evil was sure to come of that connection. That truly I believe you. I believe poor Harry is killed, and I believe his murderer, for what purpose God alone can tell, is still lurking in his victim's room. Well, let our name be Vengeance. Called Bradshaw. The footman came at the summons, very white and nervous. Will you softly gather, Bradshaw, said the lawyer. This suspense, I know, is telling upon all of you. It is now our intention to make an end of it. Paul here and I are going to force our way into the cabinet. If all is well, my shoulders are broad enough to bear the blame. Meanwhile, lest anything should really be amiss, or any malefactor seek to escape by the back, You and the boy must go around the corner with a pair of good sticks and take your post at the laboratory door. I'll give you 10 minutes to get to the station. As Bradshaw left, the lawyer looked to his watch. And now, Paul, let us go to arms, he said. Taking the poker under his arm, he led the way into the yard. The scud had banked over the moon and were now quite dark. The wind, which only broke in puffs and draughts in that deep well of building, tossed the light of the candle to and fro about their steps. Then they came into the shelter of the theatre, and they sat down silently away. London hummed solemnly all around. Nearer at hand, stillness were only broken by the sound of a footfall, moving to and fro along the cabinet floor. So, walk all day, sir, whispered Paul. Aye, the better part of the night. Only when a new sample comes from the chemist there's a bit of a break. It's an ill conscience to such an enemy to rest. Sir, there's blood foully shedding every step there. Dark again, a little closer. Put your heart in your ear, Mr. Anderson, and tell me, is that the doctor's foot? Steps felt lightly and oddly, with certain swings for all they went so slowly. Different indeed from the heavy creaking tread of Henry Jekyll. Arson sighed. Is there never anything else? He asked. Paul nodded. Once, he said. Once I heard it weeping. Weeping, how's that? Said the lawyer, conscious of a sudden chill of horror. Weeping like a woman or a lost soul, said the butler. I came away with an upset in my heart. I could have wept too. Now the 10 minutes drew to an end. Paul disinterred the axe from under a stack of packing straw. The candle was set upon the nearer table, the light them to the attack, and they drew near with bated breath to where that patient foot was still going up and down, quiet of the night. Jekyll, cried out with a loud voice, I demand to see you. He paused a moment, there came no reply. I give you fair warning, our suspicions are aroused, and I must and shall see you, he resumed. Not by fair means and foul, and not of your consent, but by brute force. Addison, said the voice, for God's sake have mercy. That's not Jekyll's voice, it's Hyde's, cried out. Down with the door, Paul. Paul swung the axe over his shoulder. While I shook the building, the red baize door leaped against the lock and hinges. The dismal screech of mere animal terror rang from the cabinet. Up went the axe again, and again the panels crashed, and the flame bounded. 4 times the blow fell. The wood were tough, and the fittings were of excellent workmanship. Not until the 5th, the lock burst in sunder, and the wreck of the door fell inward in the carpet. The besiegers, appalled by their own riot and the stillness that had succeeded, stood back and a little bit peered in. There lay the cabinet before their eyes in the quiet lamplight, a good fire glowing and chattering on the hearth, the kettle singing its thin strain, a drawer or two open, papers neatly set forth on a business table, and nearer the fire, the things laid out for tea. The quietest room, you would have said, and but for the glazed presses full of chemicals, most commonplace that night in London. Right in the midst there lay a body of a man, sorely contorted and still twitching. They drew nearer on tiptoe, turned it on his back, and beheld the face of Edward Arthur. He was dressed in clothes far too large for him. Clothes of the doctor's, The cords of his face still moved with a semblance of laugh. His laugh was quite gone. By the crushed file in his hand, and the strong smell of kernels that held him on the air, Arthur knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer. You've come too late, he said sternly. Whether to save or punish, Hyde is gone to his account. It only remains for us to find the body of your master. A far greater proportion of the building were occupied by the theatre, which filled almost the old ground story and were lighted from above by the cabinet, which formed an upper story at one end and looked upon the count's court. A corridor joined the theatre to the door on the bar street, and with this the cabinet communicated separately by a second flight of stairs. There were beside the few dark closets and a spacious cellar. All these now thoroughly examined, each closet needed but a glance, for all were empty, and all, by the dust that fell from their doors, stood long unopened. The cellar, indeed, were filled with crazy lumber, mostly dated from the times of the surgeon who were Jekyll's predecessor. But even as they opened the door, they were advertised the useless of further search by the fall of a perfect mat of cobwebs, which had for years sealed up the entrance. Nowhere were there any trace of Henry Jekyll, dead or alive. Paul stamped on the flags in the corridor. He must be buried here, he said, hearkening to the sound. They may have fled, said Hudson. He turned to examine the door in the bar street. They were locked, and lying nearby on the flag, they found the key, already stained with rust. This does not look like use, observed the lawyer. Use? Echoed Paul. Do you not see it, sir? It's broken, much as if a man had stepped upon it. Aye, continued Hudson, and the fractures too are rusty. The two men looked at each other with a scare. This is beyond me, Paul, said the lawyer. Let's go back to the cabinet. They mounted the stairs in silence, and still with an occasional awestruck glance at the dead body, proceeded to more thoroughly examine the contents of the cabinet. On one table there were traces of chemical work, various measured heaps of some white salt being laid out on glass saucers as though for an experiment, from which an unhappy man had been prevented. "There's the same drug that was bringing him," said Paul, and even as he spoke the kettle with a startling noise boiled over. This brought him to the fireside. The easy chair was drawn cosily up, and the tea thing stood ready to sit his elbow, very sugar in the cup. There were several books on a shelf. One lay beside the tea things open, and Hutchinson was amazed to find a copy of pious work, which Jekyll had several times expressed a great esteem, annotated in his own hand, startling blasphemy. Next, in the course of their review of the chamber, their searchers came to the cheval glass, into whose depths they looked with an involuntary horror. It was so turned as to show them nothing but the rosy globe playing on the roof. Fire sparkled in 100 repetitions along the greyish front of the press, and their own pale and fearful countenance stooping to look in. "This glass has seen some strange things, sir," said Paul. "Surely none stranger in itself," echoed the lawyer in the same place. "What did Jekyll," he caught himself at the word with a start and then conquering weakness, "what could Jekyll want with it?" he said. "You may say that," said Paul. Next they turned to the business table. On the desk, among the neat array of papers, a large envelope were uppermost, and it bore in the doctor's hand the name of Mr. Utterson. The lawyer unsealed it, and several enclosures fell to the floor. The first were a will, drawn in the same eccentric terms to the one which he had returned 6 months before, to serve as a testament in case of death, and as a deed of gift in the case of disappearance. In place of the name of Edward I, the lawyer, with indescribable amazement, read the name of Gabriel John Utterson. He looked at Paul, and then back at the paper, and last of all at the dead malefactor stretched upon the carpet. "My head goes round," he said. "He's been all these days in possession, and he has no cause to like me. He must have raged to see himself displaced, and he has not destroyed this document." He caught up the next paper, with a brief note in the doctor's hand, and dated at the top. "Oh, Paul," the lawyer cried, "you're alive here in this day. He cannot have been disposed of in so short a space. He must still be alive. He must have fled. And then why fled? And how? And then that... Oh, hang on a sec. More of this seems... Oh. That seems to be sorted there. Doesn't seem like we're for a restaurant that night. Well, at least they're up and about, of course. Right. Where are we? "Oh, Paul," the lawyer cried. "He was alive when here this day. He cannot have been disposed of in so short a space. He must be still alive. He must have fled. And then why fled, and how? And in that case, can you venture to declare this suicide? Oh, we must be careful. I still see that we may involve your master in some dire catastrophe." "Why don't you read it, sir?" asked Paul. "Because I fear," replied the lawyer solemnly. "God grant I have no cause for it." With that he brought the paper to his eyes and read as follows: "My dear Utterson, when this shall fall into your hands, I shall have disappeared. Under what circumstances I have not penetration to foresee. But my instinct, and all the circumstance of my nameless situation, tell me the end is sure and must be early. Go then, and first read the narrative which Leighton warned me he was to place in your hands, and if you care to hear more, turn to the confession of your unworthy and unhappy friend, Henry Jekyll." "There was a third enclosure?" asked Utterson. "Yes, sir," said Paul, gave into his hands a considerable packet, sealed in several places. The lawyer put it in his pocket. "I'd say nothing in this paper. If your master has fled or is dead, you may at least save his credit. It is now 10. I must go home and read these documents in quiet. I shall be back before midnight, which we shall send for the police. Went out, locking the door of the theatre behind them. Mutterson, once more leaving the servants gathered about the fire in the hall, trudged back to his office to read the two narratives in which the mystery was now to be explained. That's the end of that chapter, leading us on to Dr. Lanyon's narrative. It seems we're about to get some answers. I'm still not entirely clear on what's happened, but a quick drink of water to wet my throat and get me ready for these two, because I'm hoping I won't have to stop between them. There's 2 more chapters left, I think. They might be a bit long, so we'll see how we get on. Still very dramatic. Surprised actually that Hyde would kill himself. He didn't seem the sort of man. Then again, I suppose he might have his own reason. I'm trying to think a second to see if I can venture a guess at what's happened, really, but I've got no idea, really. Right. Let's press on then and read these. I'm still open to get through this and the other story tonight, so let's press on. Dr. Lanyon's narrative. On the 9th of January, now 4 days ago, I received by the evening delivery a registered envelope addressed in the hand of my colleague, an old school companion, Henry Jekyll. I was a good deal surprised by this, for we were by no means in the habit of correspondence. I had seen the man, dined with him indeed the night before, and I could imagine nothing near our interval. Oh, hang on, more pieces. Thanks, gone again. Outside, Lord, I think I'm going to have to do just this book and not do the other one. Which is annoying, because that means I have an awkward length piece to go tomorrow, but it's just not working tonight. Oh well, right. So, I've seen the man, done with him indeed the month before, and I could imagine nothing in their intercourse that would justify the formality of registration. Something's increased, I wonder. This is how the letter ran. 10th December 18. The Alanian, you were one of my oldest friends, and although we may have different times on scientific questions, I cannot remember, at least on my side, any breaks in our affection. There are never a day when if you had said to me, Jekyll, my life, my honour, my reason depend upon you, I would not have sacrificed my fortune or my left hand well to you. Lanyon, my life, my honour, and my reason are all at your mercy. If you fail me tonight, I am lost. You might suppose, after this process, that I am going to ask you for something dishonourable. Grant, judge for yourself. I want you to postpone all other engagements for tonight, even if you are summoned to the bedside of an emperor, take a cab, unless your carriage should be actually at the door. And with this letter in your hand, for consultation, drive straight to my house. Paul, my butler, has orders. You will find him waiting for your arrival with a locksmith. The door of my cabinet is there to be forced. You were to go in alone, to open the glazed press, letter E, on the left hand, breaking the lock if it be shut. And I draw out, with all its contents as they stand, the fourth drawer from the top, or, which is the same thing, the third from the bottom. In my extreme distress of mind, I have a morbid fear of misdirecting you, but even if I am in error, you may know the right drawer by its contents. Some powders, a file, and a paper book. This drawer I beg you to carry back with you to Cavendish Square exactly as it stands. That is the first part of the service. Now for the second. You should be back, if you set out at once on the receipt of this, long before midnight. But I will leave you that amount of margin, not only in the fear of one, the obstacles that can neither be prevented nor foreseen, because an hour when your servants are in bed is to be preferred for what will then remain to do. At midnight then I have to ask you to be alone in your consulting room. Admit with your own hand into the house a man who will present himself in my name, and place in his hands the drawer that you will have brought with you from my cabinet. Then you will have played your part and earned my gratitude completely. 5 minutes afterwards, if you insist upon an explanation, you will have understood these arrangements are of capital importance, and that by the neglect of one of them, fantastic as they must appear, they might have changed your conscience with my death or the shipwreck of my reason. Confident as I am that you will not trifle with this appeal, my heart sinks and my hand trembles at the bare thought of such a possibility. Think of me at this hour, in a strange place, labouring under a blackness of distress that no fancy can exaggerate, yet well aware that, if you will punctually serve me, my trouble will roll away like a story that is told. Serve me, my dear Lanyon, and save your friend. H.J. P.S. I had already sealed this up when a fresh terror struck upon my soul. It is possible that the post office may fail me, and this letter not come into your hands until tomorrow morning. In that case, dear Lanyon, do my errand when it should be most convenient for you in the course of the day, and once more expect my messenger at midnight. It may then already be too late, and if that night passes without event, you will know that you have seen the last of Henry Jekyll. Upon the reading of this letter, I made sure my colleague were insane. But until that was proved, beyond possibility of doubt, I felt bound to do as he requested. The less I understood of this forever, the less I was in a position to judge its importance. An appeal so worded could not be set aside without grave responsibility. I rose accordingly from my table to go into the hansom and drove straight to Jekyll's house. The butler were awaiting my arrival. He had received by the same post as mine a registered letter of instructions. I sent at once for a locksmith and a carpenter. The tradesman came while we were yet speaking, and we moved the body to old Dr. Denman's surgical theatre, from which, as you were doubtless aware, Jekyll's private cabinet is most conveniently in. The door very strong, the lock excellent. The carpenter avowed he would have a great trouble and have to do much damage if force were to be used, and the locksmiths were near despair. But this last were an handy fellow, and after 2 hours' work the door stood open. Press my theatre unlocked. I took out the drawer, had it filled up with straw and tied in a sheet, and returned with it to Cavendish Square. Here I proceeded to examine its contents. The powders were neatly enough made up, not with the nicety of a dispensing chemist. They were plain they were Jekyll's private manufacture. When I opened one of the wrappers, I found what seemed to be simple crystalline salt of white colour. The phial, which I next turned my attention, might have been about half full of blood red liquor, which were highly pungent in the sense of smell, and seemed to me to contain phosphorus and some volatile ether. At the other ingredients I could make no guess. The book were an ordinary version book, contained little but a series of dates. These covered a period of many years, but I observed that the entries ceased there half a year ago, and quite abruptly. Here and there, a brief remark appended to a date, usually no more than a single word, double, going back 6 times in total, to several hundred entries. And once and very early in the list, following by several marks and exclamations, total failure. This whetted my curiosity, told me little that was definite. Here a vial of some tincture, paper of some salt, and the record of a series of experiments that had led, like too many of Jekyll's investigations, to no end of practical usefulness. How could the presence of all these articles in my house affect either the honour, the sanity, or the life of my flighty colleague? His message could go to one place, why could he not go another? And even granting some implement, impediment, why would this gentleman be received by me in secret? The more I reflected, the more convinced I grew that I was dealing with a case of cerebral disease. And though I dismissed my servants to bed, I laid no resolver that I might be found in some posture of self-defence. 12 o'clock had scarce rung out over London ere the knocker sounded very gently on the door. I went myself at the summons and found a small man crouching against the pillars of the portico. "You come from Dr. Jekyll?" I asked. He told me yes, with a constrained gesture. When I had bidden him enter, he did not obey me without a searching backward glance at the darkness of the square. There were a policeman not far off, glancing with his bull's eye open. At the sight I thought my visitor started and made a greater haste. These particulars struck me, I confess, disagreeably, and I followed him into the bright light of the consulting room, and kept my hand ready on my weapon. Here at last I had a chance of cleanly seeing him. I had never set eyes on him before, so much was certain. He was small, as I have said. I was struck besides with the shocked expression of his face, with his remarkable combination of great muscular activity, great apparent debility of constitution, and, last but not least, with the odd subjective disturbance caused by his neighbourhood. This bore some resemblance to incipient rigour. This was accompanied by a marked sinking of the pulse. At the time I set it down as some idiosyncratic personal distaste, and merely wondered at the acuteness of the symptoms. I have since had reason to believe the cause to lie much deeper in the nature of man, and they turn on some nobler ends than the principle of hatred. The person who had thus, from the first moment of his entrance, struck in with me what I can only describe as a disgustful curiosity, was dressed in a fashion that would have made an ordinary person laughable. His clothes, let me say, although they were a rich and sober fabric, were enormously too large for him in every measurement. The trousers hanging upon his legs and rolled up to keep them from ground, the waist of the coat below his haunches, and the collar sprawling wide upon his shoulders. Strange to relate, this ludicrous accoutrement were far from moving me to laughter. Rather, there was something abnormal and misbegotten in the very essence of the creature that now faced me. Something seasoned, surprising, and revolting. This fresh disparity seemed to fit in with and to reinforce it, so that to my interest in the man's nature and character was added a curiosity as to his origin, his life, his fortune, and his status in the world. These observations, though they have taken so great space to be set down in, were yet the work of a few seconds. Our visitor were indeed on fire with a sombre excitement. "Have you got it?" he cried. "Have you got it?" And so lively was impatience that he even laid his hand upon my arm and sought to shake me. I put him back, conscious at this touch of a certain icy pang along my blood. "Come, sir, you forget that I have not yet the pleasure of your acquaintance. Be seated, if you please." And I showed him an example, and sat down myself in my customary seat, and with as fair an intimation of my ordinary manner to a patient, the lateness of the house, and the nature of my preoccupations, and the horror I had of my visitor would suffer me to muster. "I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon," he replied civilly enough. "What you say is very well founded. My impatience has shown its heels to my politeness. I came here at the insistence of your colleague, Dr. Henry Jekyll, on a piece of business for some moment, and I understood." He paused to put his hand on his throat, and I could see, in spite of his collected manner, that he was wrestling against the approach of hysteria. "I understood the drawer." Here I took pity on the visitor's suspense, and some perhaps of my own growing curiosity. "There is, sir," said I, pointing to the drawer, where it lay on the floor behind the table, still covered with a sheet. He sprang to it, and then paused, and laid his hand upon his arm. I could hear his teeth grate with the convulsive action of his jaw, and his face was so ghastly to see that I grew alarmed, both for his life and his reason. "Compose yourself," said I. He turned a dreadful smile at me, as if with the decision of despair, plucked away the sheet. At the sight of the contents, he uttered one loud sob of such immense relief that I sat petrified. The next moment, in a voice that was already fairly well under control, "Have you a graduated glass?" he asked. I rose from my place with something of an effort and gave him what he asked. He thanked me with a smiling nod, measured out a few mimtims of the root tincture, and added one of the powders. Then mixture, which we was at first of a reddish hue, began in proportion. Crystals melted to brighten in colour, to effervesce audibly, and to throw off small fumes of vapour. Suddenly, and at the same moment, the ebullition ceased, and the compound changed to a dark purple, which faded again more slowly to a watery green. My visitor, who had watched these metamorphoses with a keen eye, smiled, set down the glass upon the table, and turned to look upon me with an air of scrutiny. And now, set what remains. Will you be wise? Will you be guided? Will you suffer me to take this glass in my hand to go forth from your house without further parley? Has a greed or curiosity too much command of you? Think before you answer, for it shall be done as you decide. As you decide, you shall be left as you were before, neither richer nor wiser, unless some sense of service rendered to a man in mortal distress may count this kind of riches of the soul. Or if you should prefer to choose a new province of knowledge, new avenues to fame and power should be laid open to you here in this room. Upon the instant your sight should be blasted by a prodigy to stagger the unbelief of the saint. Sir, said I, affecting a coolness that was far from truly possession, you speak of Nicholas, and you perhaps not wonder that I hear you with no very strong impression of belief. I have gone too far in the way of inexplicable services to pause before I see the end. It is well, replied my visitor. Lanyon, you remember your vows? What follows is under the seal of our profession. And now, you have so long been bound to the most narrow and material views, you have denied the virtue of transcendental medicine. You have decided your superiors, derided your superiors, behold. He put the glass to his lips and drank it at one gulp. A cry followed, he reeled, staggered, clutched at the table and held on, startled, with injected eyes, gasping with open mouth, and as I looked, there came, I thought, a change. He seemed to swell, his face became suddenly black, and the features seemed to melt and alter. The next moment I had sprung to my feet and leaped back against the wall, my arm raised to shield me from the prodigy, my mind submerged in terror. Oh God, I screamed, oh God, again and again. There before my eyes, pale and shaken and half-faint, groping before him with his hand like a man restored from death. There stood Henry Jekyll. What he told me in the next hour I cannot bring my mind to set on paper. I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard, and my soul sickened with it. But nowhere when that sign has faded from my eyes. I ask myself if I believe it, and I cannot answer. My life is shaken to its roots. Sleep has left me. The deadliest terror sits by me at all hours of the day and night. I feel that my days are numbered, and I must die. And yet I shall die incredulous. As for the moral turpitude that man unveiled to me, even with tears of penitence, I cannot, even in memory, dwell upon it without start of horror. I will say but one thing, Watson, and that, if you can bring your mind to credit it, will be more than enough. The creature who crept into my house that night was, on Jekyll's own confession, known by the name of Arlen, and heretofore in every corner of the land as the murderer of Garrow. Hasty Lanyon. That's the end of the account. So if I've written that right, I was Jekyll. Jekyll were I. I suppose that makes some sort of sense. It's not entirely clear. I think the mechanics of it. Some sort of potion transformed things. Seems an odd thing to me. Let's press on. Let's finish up the final account. I think that's the final chapter anyway. Yeah, it seems like it's probably the longest chapter in here, so it will clear us up what we need to know. Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case. Was born in the year 18, to a large fortune, endowed besides with excellent parts, inclined by nature to industry, fond of the respect of the wise and good among my fellow men, and thus, as might have been supposed, with every guarantee of an honourable and distinguished future. And indeed, the worst of my faults was a certain impatient gaiety of disposition, such as has made the happiness of many but such as are, as I found it hard to reconcile with my imperious desire to carry my head high, and wear a more than commonly grave countenance before the public. Hence it came about that I concealed my pleasures, When I reached my years of reflection, I began to look around me and take stock of my progress and position in this world, I was already committed to a profound duplicity of life. Many a man would have even blazoned such irregularities such as I was guilty of. From the high views that I had set before me, I regarded and hid them with an almost morbid sense of shame. With us, rather than the exacting nature of my aspiration, any particular degradation in my thoughts, made me what I was, and with even a deeper trench than in the majority of men, severed in me those provenances of good and ill which divide and compound man's dual nature. In this case, I was driven to reflect deeply and inveterately on that hard law of life, which lies at the root of religion and is one of the most plentiful springs of distress. By so profound a double dealer, I was in no sense an hypocrite. Both sides of me were in dead earnest. I was no more myself when I had laid aside restraint and plunged in shame than when I laboured in the eye of the day with furtherance of knowledge or the relief of sorrow and suffering. And it chanced that the direction of my scientific studies, which led wholly towards the mystic and the transcendental, reacted and shaded a strong light on this consciousness of a perennial war among my members. Every day, and from both sides of my intelligence, the moral and intellectual, I thus drew steadily nearer that truth by whose partial discovery I have been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck. The man is not truly one, but truly two. I say this because the state of my own knowledge does not pass beyond that point. Others will follow, others will outstrip me on the same lines, and I hazard to guess that man will be ultimately known for a mere policy of multifarious, incongruous, and independent denizens. I, for my part, from the nature of my life, advanced infallibly in one direction, and one direction only. It was on the moral side, and in my own person, that I learned to recognise the thorough and primitive duality of man. I saw that of the two natures that contended in the field of my consciousness, even if I could rightly be said to be either, it was only because I was radically both. And from an early day, even before the curse of my scientific discoveries had finally begun to suggest the most naked possibility of such a miracle, I had learned to dwell with pleasure, as a beloved daydream, on thoughts of the separation of these elements. If each, I told myself, could but be housed in separate identities, life would be relieved of all that were unbearable. The unjust might go his way, delivered from the aspirations and remorse of his more upright twin, and the just could walk steadfastly and securely on his upward path, doing the good things in which he found his pleasure, and no longer exposed to disgrace and penitence by the hands of the extraneous evil. It was the curse of mankind that these incongruent faggots were thus bound together, and that in the agonized womb of consciousness these polar twins should be continually struggling. How then were they dissociated? I'm going to stop here and say that for all that I was sort of breathless and struggling on that, in my defence, that whole thing were a single paragraph. Stevenson is a difficult author, I think. The story is good, but by the Lord, there's some of it very, very worthy. I was so far in my reflections when, as I have said, a sidelight began to shine on the subject from the laboratory table. I began to perceive more deeply than has ever yet been stated the trembling immateriality, the mist-like transience of this seemingly so solid body in which we walked at times. Certain agents I found had the power to shake and pluck back that fleshy vestment, even as a wind might toss the curtains of a pavilion. For two good reasons I will not enter deeply into the scientific branch of my confession. First, because I have been made to learn that the doom and burden of our life is bound forever on man's shoulders. When the attempt is made to cast it off, it but returns upon us with more unfamiliar and more awful pressure. Second, because I have my narrative will make, alas, to everyone, my discoveries were incomplete. Enough then that I not only recognise my natural body for the mere aura and effulgence of certain of the powers that make up my spirit, managed to compound a drug by which these powers should be dethroned from their supremacy. A second form of countenance substituted, none the less natural to me because they were the expression and bore the stamp of lower elements in my soul. I hesitated long before I put this theory to the test of practice. I knew well that I risked death for any drug that so potently controlled and shook the very fortress of identity, marked by the least scruple of an overdose or the least inopportunity in the moment of exhibition, hardly blow out that immaterial tabernacle which I looked at to it to change. The temptation of its discovery is so singular and profound that last overcame the suggestions of alarm. I had long since prepared my tincture. I purchased at once from a firm of wholesale chemists a large quantity of particular salt, which I knew from my experiments to be the last ingredient required. Late one accursed night, I compounded the elements, watched them boil and smoke together in the glass. When the ebullition had subsided, with a strong glow of courage, drank off the potion. Most racking pangs succeeded. Grinding in the bones, deadly nausea, and an horror of the spirit that cannot be exceeded at the hour of birth or death. Then these agonies began swiftly to subside, and I counted myself as out of a great sickness. There was something strange in my sensation, something indescribably new, and, from its very novelty, incredibly sweet. I felt younger, lighter, happier in body. Within, I was conscious of an eddy recklessness, a current of discordant sensual images running like a mill race in my fancy, a solution of the bonds of obligation, an unknown but not innocent freedom of the soul. I knew myself at the first breath of this new life to be more wicked, tenfold more wicked, sold a slave to my original evil, and the thought in that moment braced and delighted me like wine. I stretched out my hands, exulting in the freshness of these sensations, and in the act I was suddenly aware that I had lost in stature. There were no mirror at that date in my room, which stands beside me now as I write my brought there later on, and for the very purpose of these transformations. The night, however, was far gone into the morning, black as it was, nearly ripe for inception of the day. The inmates of my house were locked in the most rigorous hours of slumber. I determined, flushed as I was with open triumph, to venture in my new shape, as far as my bedroom. Across the yard, wherein the constellations looked down upon me, I could have thought, with wonder, the first creature of that sort, their unsleeping vigilance had yet disclosed to me. I stole through the corridors, a stranger in my own house, and coming to my room, I saw for the first time the appearance of Edward Ard. I must here speak by theory alone, saying not that which I know, that which I suppose to be most probable. The evil side of my nature, to which I had now transferred this stamp and efficacy, were less robust and less developed than the good which I had just deposed. Again, in the course of my life, which had been, after all, 9/10 of little effort, virtue, and control, had been much less exercised and much less exhausted. Hence, as I think, it came about that Edward Ard was so much smaller, slighter, and younger than Henry Jekyll. Even as good shone upon the countenance of the one, evil written broadly and plainly on the face of the other, evil beside, which I must still believe to be the lethal side of man, had left on my body an imprint of deformity and decay. And yet when I looked upon that ugly idiot, idle in the glass, I was conscious of no repugnance, rather a lethal welcome. This too was myself. It seemed natural and human. In my eyes it bore a livelier image of the spirit. It seemed more expressive and single than the imperfect and desired countenance I had been hitherto accustomed to call mine. And insofar as I was doubtless right, I observed that when I wore the semblance of Edward Ard, none could come near to me first without a visible misgiving of the flesh. This, as I take it, was all human beings as we meet them are commingled out of good and evil. Edward Ard alone, in the ranks of mankind, were pure evil. I lingered but a moment at the mirror. The second and conclusive experiment had yet to be attempted. It remained to be seen if I had lost my identity beyond redemption, and must flee before daylight from an house that was no longer mine. Hurrying back to my cabinet, I once more prepared and drank the cup, once more suffered the pain of dissolution, came to myself once more with the character, stature, the face of Henry Jekyll. That night I had come to the fatal crossroads. Had I approached my discovery in a more noble spirit, had I risked the experiment while under the empire of generous or pious aspirations, all must have been otherwise. From the agonies of death and birth, I had come forth an angel instead of a fiend. The drug had no discriminating action. It was neither diabolical nor divine. It shook the doors of the prison house of my disposition, like the captives of Philippi, that which stood within ran forth. At the time my virtue slumbered. My evil, kept awake by my ambition, were alert and swift to seize the occasion, and the thing that was projected was Edward Ard. Hence, although I had now two characters as well as two appearances, one that were wholly evil and the other was still the old Henry Jekyll, the incongruous compound of whose reformation and improvement I had already learned to despair. The movement was thus wholly towards the worse. Even at that time I had not yet conquered my aversion to the dryness of a life of study. I'd still be merrily disposed at times, and as my pleasures were, to say the least, undignified, and I were not only well known and highly considered, growing towards the elderly man, this incoherency in my life was daily growing more unwelcome. I was on this side that my new power tempted me until I fell into slavery. I happened to drink the cup, took off at once the body of the noted professor, and to assume, like a thick cloak, that of Edward Ard. I smiled at the notion. It seemed to me at the time to be humorous, and I made my preparations with the most studious care. I took and furnished the house and sofa, which I had retracked by the police, and engaged as housekeeper a creature whom I well knew to be silent and unscrupulous. On the other side, I announced to my servants that Mr. R, whom I described, was to have full liberty and power about my house and the square, and to parry mishaps. I even called and made himself a familiar object in my second character. I next drew up that will to which you so much objected, so that if anything befell me and the person who got Jekyll, I could enter on that of Edward Hyde without pecuniary loss. Thus fortified, I supposed on every side, I began to profit of the strange immunities of my position. My throat's starting to give me trouble. I'm going to stop here and take a quick drink of water. This is a very wordy last chapter. I'll get this sort of rounding out all of the mystery. Let's drag on. Which is a shame because the rest of the story are pretty good. Oh. Men of before are bravos to transact their crimes, while their own person and reputation sat under shelter. I was the first that ever did so for his pleasures. I was the first that could thus plod in the public eye with a load of genial respectability, and in a moment, like a schoolboy, strip off these lendings and spring headlong into a sea of liberty. But for me, my impenetrable mantle, the safety was complete. Think of it, I did not even exist. Not but escaping my laboratory door, give me but a second or two to mix and swallow the draught, I'd always stand him ready, and whatever he had done, Edward Hyde would pass away like the strain of a breath on a mirror. And there in his stead, quietly alone, trimming the midnight lamp in his study, a man who could afford to laugh at suspicion, would be Emery Jekyll. The pleasure which I made haste to seek in my disguise were, as I have said, undignified. I would scarce use an harder term. In the hands of Edward Hyde, they soon began to turn towards the monstrous. When I would come back from these excursions, I were often plunged into a kind of wonder at my vicarious depravity. This familiar that I called out of my own soul and sent forth alone to do his good pleasure was a being inherently malign and villainous, as every act of thought centred on self, drinking, pleasure with bestial avidity from any degree of torture to another, relentless like a man of stone. Emery Jekyll stood at times aghast before the acts of Edward Hyde. The situation were apart from ordinary laws, and insidiously relaxed the grasp of conscience. We were Hyde, after all, and Hyde alone were guilty. Jekyll were no worse, and work again with his good qualities seemingly unimpaired. He would even make case where it were possible to undo the evil done by Hyde, unless his conscience slumbered. Into the details of the infamy, which I thus cannot, for even now I can scarce grant I committed it, I have no design of entering. I mean but to point out the warning and the successive steps with which my chastisement approached. I met with one accident, which, as it brought on no consequence, I shall no more than mention. That act of cruelty to a child aroused against me the anger of a passer-by, whom I recognised the other day in the person of your kinsman. The doctor and the child's family joined in. There were moments which I feared for my life, and at last, in order to pacify their too just resentment, Edward Hyde had to bring them to the door and pay them in a cheque drawn in the name of Emery Jekyll. This danger easily eliminated in the future by opening an account at another bank in the name of Edward Hyde himself. When, by stopping my own hand backward, I had supplied my double with a signature, I thought I sat beyond the reach of fate. Some 2 months before the murder of Sir Danvers, I had been out for one of my adventures, returned at a late hour, and woke the next day in my bed with somewhat odd sensations. It were in vain I looked about me, in vain I saw the decent furniture in tall proportion to my room in the square, in vain that I recognised the patterns of the bed curtains and the design of the mahogany frame. Something still kept insisting that I were not where I was. I had not wakened where I seemed to be, but in the little room in Soho where I was accustomed to sleep in the body of Edward Hyde. I smiled myself, and in my psychological way began lazily to inquire into the premise of this illusion. Occasionally, even as I did so, it dropped back into a comfortable morning doze. I was still so engaged when, in one of my more wakeful moments, my arm fell upon my hand. Now the hand of Henry Jekyll, as you have often remarked, was professional in shape and size. It was large, firm, white, and comely. The hand which I now saw clearly enough in the yellow light of mid-London morning, lying half shot in the bedclothes, was lean, corded, knuckly, with dusky pallor, thickly shaded with a smart growth of hair, and with the hand of Edward I. I must have stared upon it for near half a minute. Sometimes I was, in the mere stupidity of wonder, for terror woke up in my breast, the sudden and startling the crash of cymbals. And bounding from my bed, I rushed to the mirror. At the sight that met my eyes, my blood was changed into something exquisitely thin and icy. Yes, I had gone to bed Henry Jekyll. I had awakened Edward I. How was this to be explained? I asked myself then, with another bound of terror. How was it to be remedied? It was well into the morning. Servants were up, all my drugs were in the cabinet. A long journey down 2 pairs of stairs, through the back passage, across the open court, and through the anatomical theatre, from where I was then standing horror struck. It might indeed be possible to cover my face, but what was the use of that when I was unable to conceal the alterations in my stature? And then, with overpowering sweetness of relief, it came back to my mind that the servants were already used to the coming and going of my second self. I had soon dressed as well as I was able in clothes of my own size. I soon passed through the house, where Bradshaw stared and drew back at seeing Mr. Hyde at such an hour, in such strange array. And 10 minutes later, Dr. Jekyll had returned to his own shape and was sitting down with a darkened brow to make a faint at breakfast. Small indeed was my appetite. This inexplicable incident, this reversal of my previous experience, seemed like the Babylonian finger on the wall, dispelling out the letters of my judgment. I began to reflect more seriously than ever before on the issues and possibilities of my double existence. That part of me which I had the power of projecting had lately been much exercised and nourished. It seemed to me of late as though the body of Edward Hyde had grown in stature, as though when I wore that form I were conscious of more generous tide of blood. I began to spy a danger that, if this were much prolonged, the balance of my nature might be permanently overthrown, the power of voluntary change be forfeited, and the character of Edward Hyde become irrevocably mine. The power of the drug had not been always equally displayed. Once, very early in my career, it had totally failed me. Since then I have been obliged on more than one occasion to double, and once with infinite risk of death, to treble the amount. And these rare uncertainties had cast the light of that morning's accident. I was led to remark that whereas in the beginning the difficulty had been to throw off the body of Jekyll, had been of late gradually but decidedly transferred itself to the other side. All things therefore seemed to point to this. I was slowly losing hold of my original and better self, and becoming slowly incorporated with my second and worse. Another issue with the wards, apparently. That don't seem to be a night for anything, eh? Alright, let's see if we can get it working again. Let me know, lad. You know. Okay, back up. Good. This is the shaky. Okay, well. Let's just get through this and yeah, we'll call the other Malala for another night. Between these two, I now felt I had to choose. My two natures had a memory in common. All other faculties were most unequally shared between them. Jekyll, who were composite, now with the most sensitive apprehensions, now with greedy gusto, projected the ship, and shared in the pleasure and adventures of art. The Hyde were indifferent to Jekyll, or but remembered him as the mountain bandit remembers the cavern in which he conceals himself from pursuit. Jekyll had more than a father's interest, I had more than a son's indifference. Casting my lot with Jekyll was to die of those appetites which I had long secretly indulged, and at a late began to pamper. Casting him with Hyde was to die of 1,000 interests and aspirations, and have become, at a blow, forever despised and friendless. The bargain might appear unequal, but there was still another consideration in the scales. While Jekyll would suffer smartly in the fires of abstinence, I would be not even conscious of all that he had lost. Strange as my circumstances were, the terms of this debate are as old as commonplace as man. Must the same inducements and alarms cast the die for any tempted and trembling sinner? It fell out with me as it falls out with so vast a majority of my fellows that I chose the better part, and found wanting the strength to keep it. Yet I preferred the elderly and discontented doctor, surrounded by friends and cherishing honest hopes, and bade a resolute farewell to the liberty, the comparative youth and the light steps, fleeting impulses and secret pleasure that I had enjoyed in the disguise of art. I made this choice perhaps with some unconscious reservation, for I neither gave up the house in Soho nor destroyed the clothes I had with art, but still lay ready in my cabinet. 2 months, however, I was true to my determination. 2 months I led a life of such severity as I had never before attained to, enjoyed the compensations of an approving conscience. Time began at last to obliterate the freshness of my alarm. The praise of conscience began to grow into a thing of course. I began to be tortured with throes and longings as of I had struggling after freedom, and at last, in an hour of moral weakness, I once again compounded and swallowed the transforming draught. I do not suppose that, when a drunkard reasons with himself upon his vice, he is once out of 500 times afflicted by the dangers that he runs, with his brutish physical insensibility. Neither had I, as long as I considered my position, made enough allowance for the complete moral insensibility and insensate readiness to evil which were the leading characteristics of Edward Arnold. It was by these that I was punished. My devil had been long caged, and came out roaring. I was conscious, even when I took the draught, of a more unbridled and more ferocious propensity to ill. It must have been this, I suppose, that stirred in my soul the tempest of impatience which I listened to the civilities of my unhappy victim. I declare, at least before God, no man morally sane could have been guilty of that crime upon so pitiful a provocation, and I struck in no more reasonable spirit than that in which a sick child may break a plaything. I have voluntarily tricked myself with all those balancing instincts by which even the worst of us continues to walk, with some degree of steadiness among temptation. In my case, be tempted however slightly it was to fall. Instantly the spirits of hell awoke in me enraged. With a transport of glee I mauled the unresisted body, and tasted delight from every blow. It were not till weariness had begun to succeed that I was suddenly on the top fit of my delirium, struck through the heart by a cold thrill of terror. A mist dispersed. I saw my life to be forfeit, and fled from the scene of these excesses, at once glorying and trembling. My lust of evil gratified and stimulated, my love of life screwed to the topmost pitch. I ran to the house in Soho and, to make assurance doubly sure, destroyed my papers. Once I set out through the lamplit streets in the same diverted ecstasy of mind, gloating on my crime, light-heartedly devising others in the future, and yet still hastening, still hearkening my way from the steps of the avenger. I had a song upon his lips as he compounded the draught. As he drank it, Red's the dead man. Bangs of transformation had not done tearing him before Henry Jekyll, with a stream of tears of gratitude and remorse, had fallen upon his knees and lifted his clasped hands to God. The veil of self-indulgence was rent from my head, from head to foot. I saw my life as an old. I followed it up from the days of childhood, when I walked with my father's hand, and through the self-denying tours of my professional life, arrived again and again with the same sense of unreality, at the demand horrors of the evening. I could have screamed aloud. I sought with tears and prayers to smother down the crowd of hideous images and sounds with which my memory swarmed against me. And still, between the petitions, the ugly face of my iniquity stared into my soul. As the acuteness of this remorse began to die away, it was succeeded by a sense of joy. The problem of my conduct was solved. Hard was thenceforth impossible, whether I would or not. I now confined to the better part of my existence. Oh, how I rejoiced to think it. With what willing humility I embraced anew the restrictions of natural life. With what sincere renunciation I locked the door by which I had so often gone and come, and ground the key under my heel. Next day came the news that the murder had been overlooked, that the guilt of I was patent for the world, and that the victim were a man high in public estimation. It were not only a crime, it had been a tragic folly. I think I was glad to know it. I think I was glad to have my better impulses thus buttressed and guarded by the terrors of these scaffolds. Jekyll were now my city of refuge. Never I'd peep out an instant, and the hands of all men would be raised to take and slay him. I resolved in my future conduct to redeem the past, and I can say with honesty that my resolve was fruitful of some good. You know yourself how earnestly in the last months of last year I relieved suffering. Yet that much was done for others, and that the days passed quietly, almost happily for myself. Nor can I truly say that I wearied of this beneficent and innocent life. I think instead that I daily enjoyed it more completely. I was still cursed with my duality of purpose. As the first edge of my penitence wore off, the lower side of me, so long indulged, so recently chained down, began to growl for license. Not that I dreamed of resuscitating I, the bare idea that would startle me to frenzy. No, in my own person, I once more tempted trifle with my conscience. It was an ordinary secret sinner, that I at last fell before the assaults of temptation. There comes an end to all things. The most capricious measure is filled at last. This brief condescension of my evil finally destroyed the balance of my soul. And yet I was not alarmed. The fall seemed natural. I returned the old days before I had made my discovery. For a fine, clear January day, went underfoot, where the frost had melted, cloudless overhead. I reached the park, full of winter cherubins and sweet with spring odours. I sat in the sun on a bench, the animal within me licking the chops of memory, the spiritual side a little drowned, promising subsequent penitence, not yet moved to begin. After all, I reflected, I was like my neighbours, and then I smiled, comparing myself with other men, comparing my active goodwill with the lazy cruelty of their neglect. At the very moment of that vainglorious thought, a quiet calm came over me, an horrid nausea, the most deadly shuddering. These passed away and left me faint, and then, as its turn, the faintness subsided. I began to be aware of a change in the temper of my thoughts, a greater boldness, contempt for danger, a solution of the bounds of obligation. I looked down. My clothes hung formlessly on my shoulder, my shrunken limb. The hand that lay on my knee was corded and airy. I once more Edward eyed. A moment before I had been safe of all men's respect, wealthy, beloved, a cloth laying for me in the dining room at home, and now all the common quarry of mankind, hunted, houseless, and no murderer, through to the gallows. My reason wavered, but it did not fail me utterly. I had more than once observed that in my second character my faculty seemed sharpened to a point, and my spirits more tensely elastic. As it came about that when Jekyll perhaps might succumb, I rose to the importance of the moment. My drugs were in one of the presses of my cabinet. How was I to reach them? That was the problem that, crushing my temple in my hands, I set to solve. The laboratory door I had closed. If I sought to enter by the house, my own servants would consult with the gallows. I saw I must employ another hand, and thought of Lanyon. How was he to be reached? How persuaded? Supposing that I escaped capture in the streets, how was I to make my way into his presence? And how should I, an unknown and displeased visitor, prevail on the famous physician to write for the study of his colleague, Dr. Jekyll? And I remembered that of my original character, one part remained. I could write my own hand. And once I had conceived that kindling spark, the way that I must follow became lightened upon me from end to end. Thereupon I arranged my clothes as best I could, and, summoning a passing hansom, drove to an hotel in Portland Street, the name of which I chanced to remember. My appearance was indeed comical enough, however tragic. My fate these garments covered. The driver could not conceal his mirth. I gnashed my teeth upon him with a gust of devilish fury, and then a smile withered from his face, happily for him, yet more happily for myself, for in another instant I had certainly dragged him from his perch. At the inn, as I entered, I looked about me with so black a countenance as made the attendants tremble. Not a look did I exchange in my presence, but obsequiously took my orders, led me to a private room, and brought me whitherall to arrive. Hard, in danger of his life, for a creature new to me, shaken with inordinate anger, strung to the pitch of murder, lusting to inflict pain. Yet the creature were astute, mastered his fury with a great effort of will, composed his two important letters, one to Lanyon and one to Paul, and that he might receive actual evidence of their being posted, sent them out with directions that they should be registered. Henceforth, he sat all day over a fire in the private room, gnawing his nails. There he dined, sitting alone with his fears, the weight of visibly quailing before his eye. And thence, when the night were fully come, he set forth in the corner a close cab, and were driven to and fro about the streets of the city. He, I say, I cannot say I. A child of hell had nothing human, nothing lived in him but fear and hatred. When at last, thanking the driver, had begun to grow suspicious, he discharged the cab and ventured on foot, attired in his misfitting clothes, an object marked out for observation in the midst of the internal passengers. These two base passions raised within him like a tempest. He walked fast, haunted by his fears, chattering to himself, skulking through the less frequented thoroughfares, counting the minutes still divided him from midnight. Once a woman spoke to him, offering, I think, a box of lights. He smote her in the face, and she fled. When I came to myself at Lanyon's, the horror of my old friend perhaps affected me somewhat. I do not know if it was at least but a drop in the sea of the abhorrence with which I looked back upon these hours. A change had come over me. No longer the fear of the gallows, but the horror of being ironed racked me. I received Lanyon's condemnation partly in my dream, partly in a dream that I came home to my own house, not in a bed. I slept after the prostration of the day with a stringent and profound slumber which not even the nightmare that wrung me could avail to break. I woke in the morning shapeless, weakened but refreshed. I still hated and feared the thought that brute had slept within me, and I had not, of course, forgotten the appalling danger of the day before. I was once more at home in my own house, close to my drugs, and gratitude for my escape shone so strong in my soul that it almost rivaled the brightness of life above. I was stepping leisurely across the court after breakfast, drinking the chill of the air with pleasure, and I was seized again with those indescribable sensations that heralded the change. I had but begun, and I had but the time to gain the shelter of my cabinet before I was once again raging and freezing with the passions of art. I took on this occasion a double dose to recall myself, neither myself, and alas, 6 hours after, as I sat looking sadly in the fire, pangs returned and the drug had to be re-administered. In short, from that day forth, it seemed only by a great effort at gymnastics, and only on the immediate stimulation of the drug that I were able to wear the countenance of Jekyll. All hours of the day and night I would be taken with a premonitory shudder. Above all, if I slept or even dozed for a moment in my chair, it were always I that I awakened. Under the strain of this continually impending doom, and by the sleeplessness to which I now condemned myself, I, even beyond what I had thought possible to man, I became in my own person a creature eaten up and empty by fever, languidly weak both in both minds, and solely occupied by one thought, the horror of my other self. When I slept, or when the virtue of the medicine wore off, I would leap almost without transition, the pangs of transformation grew daily less marked, in possession of a fancy brimming with images of terror, my soul boiling with causeless hatred, and a body that seemed not strong enough to contain the raging energies of life. The powers of iron seemed to have grown with the sickness of Jekyll, and certainly the eight that now divided them were equal on each side. For Jekyll it were a thing of vital instinct. He had now seen the full deformity of that creature that shared with him some of the phenomena of consciousness, must co-heir with him to death. Beyond those links of community, which in themselves made the most poignant part of his distress, he thought of Hyde, for all his energy of life, as something not only hellish, but inorganic. This was the shocking thing. The slime of the pit seemed to utter cries and voices. The amorphous dust gesticulated and sinned, and what were dead had no shape that usurped the offices of life. And this again, and that insurgent horror was nipped to him closer than a wife, closer than I, they cased in his flesh, where he heard it mutter and felt it struggle to be born. And every hour of weakness and in the confidence of slumber prevailed against him, deposited him out alone. The hatred of Hyde for Jekyll was of a different order. His terror of the gallows drove him to continually commit temporary suicide and return to a subordinate station, part instead of person. But he loathed the necessity, he loathed the despondency in which Jekyll now fallen, and he resented the dislike with which he himself was regarded. Hence the ape-like tricks he would play on me, scrawling my own hand blasphemies on the page of my books, burning the letters and destroying the portrait of my father. And indeed, had it not been for his fear of death, he would have long ruined himself in order to involve me in the ruin. But his love of life is wonderful. I go further. I, who sicken and freeze at the mere thought of him, when I recall the abjection and passion of his attachment, and when I know how he fears my powers to cut him off by suicide, I find it in my heart to pity him. He is useless, and the time awfully fails me to prolong the description. No one has ever suffered such torments, and that suffice. Yet even these habit brought, no, not alleviation, but a certain callousness of soul, a certain acquiescence of despair. And my punishment might have gone on for years, for the last calamity which is now fallen, which has finally severed me from my own face and nature. My provisions of the salt, which has been never been renewed since the day of the first experiment, began to run low. I sent out for a fresh supply and mixed the draught. Ebullition followed, and the first change of colour, not the second. I drank it, and it was without efficiency. You will learn from Paul I had London ransacked. It were in vain. I am now persuaded that I first applied a rim cure, and it was that unknown impurity which I lent efficiency to the draught. About a week has passed, and I am now finishing this statement under the influence of the last of the old powders. This, then, is the last time, short of a miracle, that Henry Jekyll can think his own thoughts, or see his own face, now sadly awkward in the glass. Now I must have delayed too long to bring my rank to an end, for if my narrative has hitherto escaped destruction, it has been by a combination of great prudence and great good luck. Should the throes of change take me in the act of writing, I tear it in pieces. If some time shall have elapsed after I have laid it by, this wonderful selfishness and circumscription of the moment will probably save it once again from the action dictated by spite. And indeed, the doom that is closing in on us both has already changed and crushed it. Half an hour from now, will I shall again and forever re-endue that hatred personality. I shall know how I shall sit suffering and weeping in my chair, continue with the most strained and fear-struck ecstasy of listening, pace up and down this room, my last earthly refuge, and give ear to every sound of menace. Will Hyde die upon the scaffold? Will he find the courage to release himself at the last moment? God knows, I'm careless. This is my true hour in death. What is the full concern to none than myself? Here then, as I lay down the pen and proceed to seal up my confessions, bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end. And that's the end. The strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Well then, let's have some comments, shall we? I suppose that does resolve all the mysteries, them being the same person. That being achieved by some chemical means, perhaps. Explain why the chemistry is still relevant compared to the surgery that I first assumed was present. That's it though. I think there is some disingenuity in here. Perhaps not intended by the author. It is, to my mind, clear that if such a thing were to happen, the transformation would be purely physical and not mental. Were this a real account, I would reckon that Dr. Henry Jekyll created the persona of Mr. Hyde to give vent to his most wicked impulses and would only transform him physically. Though perhaps he himself would believe that he was transformed into this sort of evil old self. I don't know. I'm sure there's something to it. I suspect it's some sort of morality tale that I'm maybe not getting. The idea of having these evil impulses be a separate part of oneself. I couldn't understand it, me. I'm aware of my wicked side. I'm a rat. All of us have wickedness in us. To reject that wickedness, to other it, is to be mastered by it, or at least to lack mastery of it. Whereas, if one understands and embraces their own wickedness, or at least embraces the fact of that wickedness, they by some measure have mastery over it. They have control or recognition. To fear one's own evil nature, fear one's wild impulses, fear the recklessness of one's own soul, is to never know mastery of that soul. Never have a sense of control over oneself, never be able to do anything but be a slave to those wretched and base impulses. And so an honest person, be they man or rat, must understand and recognise their own wicked and wild impulses, and must recognise when they are beyond the control of their own senses. To that very end, I'm going to eat this whole hot dog now. I'm not going to save it at all, I'm not going to ration it. I'm going to destroy it in an orgy of violence and relish in it. But I shall spare you that, for there is good in me as well as wickedness. And so, I'll bid you a good night. I hope you enjoyed this. Ta-ra.